It sounds, they rewrapped
Ready?
it, now it sounds different.
I rewrapped
He
that
should be
thing.
here.
I took that up to Karen and I said, can we
Okay,
afford more
the-
than bounty?
The May 28th meeting of the
Oh,
Durham
I
Planning
could've
Board
got
shall
this
come to
one.
order.
I could've-
All right, we're still waiting on Richard. All right, so let's do a roll call. And Gary, we're going to start on your side tonight.
Gary Whittington, present.
Robert Sullivan.
Heather Grant.
Sally Tobias.
Paul Rasmussen.
Michael Barron, Town Planner, and Richard Kelly is running late, expects to be here soon.
Peyton McManus.
Eric Lund.
Unish Nanda.
All right, let's see, what I would like to do, I don't know how much we're going to get into, so, we have 4 items on the agenda that are mandatory tonight, which are items 4, 5, 8, and 9. And the other 3 items, 6, 7, and 10 are, if we get to them, that's nice, but they're not critical for us to get to. So what I'd like to do is take items 8 and 9 and move them to the front of the agenda, if that is acceptable with everyone. I was hoping everybody would be here, but,
Oh, you are, okay, yeah, move them up. And then leave the.
so that we
leave
would
6
start
and
with the
7 to
election of
end.
officers and appointment of members to boards and commissions, and then we would get into the zoning amendments that we owe to the town council. How does that sound? Is there anybody have any heartburn with that?
No, it's not fine.
All right. Move to approve the agenda as amended?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I would like to add other business to discuss this Dunkin' Donuts
Oh, yeah.
question.
Okay.
Move that up to,
We can have it at the end, other
Other
business.
business.
Yeah.
But when we approve things, we need to know what we're approving. And this is not consistent with what 3 of the people on this board thought they were voting for.
All right. So, noted. Election of officers, first off, I'm going to have 2 questions, and then we'll get into, first off, is there anyone who's not currently an officer who'd like to become one? We have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary.
oh, you're a secretary.
You are? Yes. Mark's on it.
Peyton's
Oh.
the secretary.
Oh, okay.
Can you take her?
All right. Do all the current officers wish to remain in their seats?
Sure,
Are you all willing?
sure. It's not tough.
All right. Then, to save us a lot of time, I'll move that we maintain the current slate of officers by unanimous consent. Seconded by Rob. And, oh, that's right. I get to see.
gotta see him.
Manish, you're seated as a regular member until Richard gets here. All right, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So no changes on the officers. Committee assignments. We have a bunch of vacancies I'd love to see get filled. And is there anyone who would like to have something new? If you have questions about what any of the committees are doing, ask me, I probably have a decent idea. Between Michael and I, we can probably cover it.
What is it that we have?
So agriculture is vacant, energy is vacant. I'm currently sitting in 3. I would not mind at all giving up, or 2. I'm seated in 2. I would not mind if somebody wants to take one of those 2. That would be fine with me.
Well, Housing Task Force will hopefully be finishing up.
And integrated waste management is the tricky one on that is it's twice a month in the morning.
I don't do 8 AM.
But it's a great group of people.
They
Yeah,
are
it is.
currently, they're focusing around trying to get some, a compost pilot operation going. All right.
You don't have a tag?
Anybody, what about the ag and energy committees, which are our 2 vacancies? Any thoughts there? So the ag commission meets on Monday nights, same time as town council. On a second Monday. And I take that back. It's whenever town council has to push their first meeting of the month, they end up bouncing ag commission out of here.
Right. Or during budget season.
Or during budget season, yeah. And then energy committee meets on Tuesday nights,
Tuesdays.
once a month. Both of those are once a month.
It's a great learning experience for,
All right, well, if,
I'll- I can do ag.
Sally will do ag,
I'll do ag.
I'll take energy then.
Okay.
Curtis does ag for
He
the town
did.
council, so that makes it very
I
energetic.
was on ag when I was first, it was my first gig on town council.
Okay,
All right.
if anybody during the year, any of you who don't have a thing, wish to pick one up, they are good learning experiences.
They really are.
Okay, so just let
Yeah.
me or Michael know, and we can arrange to try to get that checked.
So the only change from existing is Paul is going to energy, and are you going off one of the other ones?
Well, housing it will be finishing up this summer. The task force should be done, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going off any, I mean, it's good to have, I mean, the Waste Management Committee really appreciates me. But they're, you know, it's a good way of providing information, two-way flow information.
The energy committee.
And the Energy Committee really needed one this past year, because they were writing up a zoning amendment. And when they brought their draft out to Michael and me, it would have been helpful if they had somebody from the planning board as a referee while they were working on it originally, I think.
All right. And Friedrichs was doing it, but she rotated off the planning board.
Yeah,
Right.
yep, she rotated off, and then Tom DiCapo
It was on ag.
rotated off as well, and he was handling agriculture last year.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 4, proposed zoning amendment, multi-unit residential. The public hearing is already closed on this. We are going to deliberate a proposal sent to us by the town council. And I believe Michael is fairly useful. So what we have, as you'll see in the first, we can choose to adopt it. Do we actually adopt it, or we just?
Oh, I mean,
we
right,
approve.
right.
We approve the.
We
We support the
support it.
adoption.
Support it,
Yeah.
right.
We can tell them we think it's a bad idea by rejecting it, or it's not so much
Right,
rejecting
not
it,
adopt,
but
support.
But support, you know, saying we really don't think it's a good idea, or we can say, we think it's all right, but here are some ways, here's some suggestions to make it better, and could, with appropriate emphasis on whether we think that really must be on there or just be a nice to have.
Well, it's,
What is the current status of the proposed state legislation that was going to impact this zoning amendment?
So there were several different ones, and most of the ones that were going to be a problem have been tabled, which means they'll be back next year in a slightly different version, most likely.
what was the one, what was the one that was going to be directly affecting this
Well,
one?
there
I
was
don't
one
really
that
think-
would allow multifamily housing in commercial zones.
That one got tabled.
Yeah, but this is not, oh, yeah, it is.
It would be similar to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one got fully tabled. I lost my,
So we could, well, I think it's in, well, are we discussing it now?
yes, so we may now deliberate.
I
I'm just looking, I lost my copy.
think it's important to keep in mind what is already allowed in that zone. Maybe,
Senior, well,
what is already
senior
allowed
multi,
by right is, other than conservation activities, livestock keeping of, a nursing home, senior housing, single family, single housing duplex.
and multi-unit.
Single housing, senior housing, multi-unit, senior care facility, and student rental.
Well, that got
Yeah,
added
that-
on with
that,
the
yeah.
lodging.
So those are already allowed by right. So multifamily, multi-unit is already allowed, but under the, all of that is already allowed. So multifamily housing is just not age restricted.
Well, I think the idea of what's currently there
And
is
what's
also-
already there,
is-
yeah.
is very, extremely relevant. Right, and what's already there is, in, if you go zone by zone, I mean, Churchill is 75% multi-unit already?
And it's a commercial zone. Yeah,
PO, basically the same
same
thing,
thing.
though I'm not sure fraternities count as multi-unit as, well, I guess
Well,
they would
they're
have to,
dormitories are.
Yeah, they're like a dormitory, but.
yeah.
But in general, there's an awful lot of what is now student
There are
housing that are
apartments.
definitely multi-unit apartment buildings in PO. In fact, I can't really understand when PO became PO, because most of those buildings have been existing for a very, very long time, but,
It's
I mean, all we have
primarily
is
multi-
Durham Medical.
I think the name was aspirational.
Yeah, well, and, so be it.
There is an
I just think
office
that it's important when you think about the fact that you already allow senior multifamily.
Yeah.
And it's already inundated with multi-unit development anyway, that as you see maybe the progression of less student housing, some of those properties are big enough to put a newer building on that would be impactful for anybody to be able to, have that availability of
There it is, right there.
multi-unit housing.
Multi-unit housing, yeah, and I think that's the key around it. When we discussed this during, I mean, you and Paul were both there, when we discussed this during the subcommittee, as per requested by the council, we did consult with a couple of property owners. We consulted with one that actually had built some of the student here, and he emphasized that that market was done, that there would be, that their interest in building more student-focused or with multi-housing that was, its economic purpose was to rent to students, was simply not in their economic horizon, because there was no longer a need for that in that. So they weren't, but there is a need in housing in general. And that actually, one of them did say that non-students had reached out to him to rent various apartments that they had. So the idea of student-focused as their primary tenant in their business operation is kind of past, whereas also the over 55, baby boomers are a finite number, I hate to say. I am one, but it's a finite number.
No, 55 plus
from someone
nowadays
else.
includes Gen X. I'm in that category now.
Gen X, yeah. So whether we need more of that, but what we do need is housing anybody can live in.
All right.
Where there's,
Right.
Take a moment, we want to recognize
Richard,
Mr. Kelly has joined us at the table, and the agenda, we modified the agenda. We already took care of officer selection, so if you'd like your new seat.
Oh, but you're so good at it, you're so used to it.
And officers have not changed from last year.
Okay. Have we
and-
done appointments?
We did do appointments. Would you like to change your appointments, or are you good with the ones that you have?
Yeah, so I'm done with Concom. In fact, I'm afraid I'm gonna need to be done on anything outside of this.
Okay.
Work's getting busy again, the commute, people are starting to go back and forth, so it now takes about 2.25 hours to get here, so.
Oh, man.
I've missed the last 2 Concom meetings, so I think you ought to kick me out if I don't,
So Concom's
Fair.
up for
Relinquish.
grabs for anyone.
But I'm not kicking you out. I'm just.
Yeah.
All right, so Conservation Commission has an opening now.
I'll make a pitch for it. It's great.
Great.
All right, it really is. The people there are very committed to the charge of the Concom. And a lot of what occurs in front of them makes it here as well. So it's a good primer. Yeah.
And the two
Okay.
often are on the same, sidewalks often.
Yeah.
Sidewalks
Yeah.
overlap.
Yes.
Okay, what we are now doing is we're discussing the multi-unit residential
Yeah, sorry for that.
amendment. All right, so, thank you, Sally.
Can I just make?
Yes,
some
I
comments?
was,
So, this is a little flavored by the Durham Climate Action Plan that was sent out earlier this week. And in reading that, you come across some findings that are relevant, I think. And that is that 41% of the emissions are related to transportation. And so I think when we think about locating housing and locating people, we should really be aware that transportation emissions are the largest source, almost, of emissions that are going out there. So I think that when we think about this, we should try to locate as many people as closely to the center of services as we possibly can. There could be another avenue here, which is we start dispersing services out to areas as well to minimize transportation. But I would say that wherever we can minimize transportation and the related effects of that we do that. So when I think about that, and I think about downtown, and I think about Mill Plaza, where there's obviously, food and medical and banking and other services. And then I think about what could be downtown, which is, in addition to restaurants, you could also have things like that. I think that as we think about multi-unit and this, that we should try to collocate those as closely as possible and provide density downtown so that people can walk, they can bike, they can take buses, they could walk to the train station, and they could try to limit their transportation impact as much as possible. So when I think about that, and for a whole host of other reasons, I think that these recommendations make a lot of sense across all of the areas, including courthouse and church and professional office. And I think that the density that's provided there, if it's done well, can minimize transportation and can increase access for mobility for all people, and that providing a walkable, bikeable, flexible infrastructure makes an awful lot of sense. So for those reasons and others, I'm in favor of all areas there adopting this.
any other, Gary?
Yeah, just, I found an old map that showed cross-hatched the developable areas suitable for development in the town, that has been out there for a while. And there's just walking the town, and this, if we want more density for reasons that Peyton has advanced and consistently with the master plan, of just providing more energy for the central part of town, this is sort of where it has to happen. And in my mind, I don't see, if you're walking around just looking and to see how densely things are developed and where there is space and the possibility of redevelopment, the professional office looked to me like the place that was, a developer would be most likely to do an assemblage or find a site. It just seemed like, it's not like this town in the central area is undeveloped. There's a lot there. And so, in looking at it, it just seemed like if our goal is increased population close to town, I'd like to hear from Michael, who obviously is the subject matter expert on this, whether this aligns with his view and his vision as the town planner of where this increased density and housing could be placed.
Well, it's certainly, generally, this concept of the transit, more density, more urban as you in the close area. And the board heard from a lot of people in the course of the attainable housing ordinance that there was a consensus that there was not about outlying areas, but there was that there should be more density and more housing types in core areas. And these are the core areas, not including Coast Corner. RA is, is somewhat of a core area. So I think it makes a lot of sense. The one thing I would just encourage you to talk about, as I noted in my notes, there was a controversial proposal for a parking lot on the large lot behind the Red Tower several years ago. So just think about that you would likely, as proposed, you would likely see a multi-unit, whether it would be student housing or a multi-unit on that property. And is that a concern? And if so, how or why not? But otherwise, it makes total sense in planning terms.
Eric?
I agree that, I have the perception that this town's under some pressure to densify, and if we are going to densify, it is far better that we put the density in the core areas of town where the infrastructure largely already exists. I see that as a win all around. More people in town means our fixed expenses get distributed over more people, and will help lower the property tax rate. It provides more customers for our downtown businesses, many of which are struggling. It's far better than the alternative of spreading everybody all out over town, which is that's just going to be wasteful. Everybody would have to drive anywhere, and I'd rather, if we're going to have more density in this town, I'd rather see it in the center of town.
So, Richard, you have something?
Yeah, so we certainly heard, whether public testimony, written testimony, the concern about increasing the density in town and looking for bedrooms, multi-unit bedrooms in town would invite more students in town, and whether that's the sort of development we would see. And I'm curious, I want to hear the opposing argument, or someone to tell me, don't worry about that, and this is why.
So and Sally was touching on it a little bit earlier, nobody is going to get new student housing in this type of multi-unit scale isn't going to pencil out anymore. The current large buildings are running at 10% vacancies, most of them, right? So the competition's now getting to the point where that is the one space that people aren't going to be bringing in. And what we need is more year-round residents.
And we heard that. No, I don't mean to interrupt, but that argument was put forward. We heard it from landlords. No one in their right mind is going to build student housing right now in Durham. It's basically what we heard. And that was from student landlords. But if we're seeking bedrooms for folks who aren't students, you think parking's needed? I mean, I hear where you're coming from, and I understand you're an advocate and all, but I'm
No,
looking to others. Do you think parking's going to be required?
I think it would be. I mean, to be,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Some parkings, and that's where I would be fully appreciative of something like the initial studies of 76 Main Street, where they were going to put parking either as a basement level, at the basement level,
Yeah.
or depending on where in town it is, maybe the back half of the first level is, a combination of parking as opposed to just being commercial the entire depth. Because when you think about it,
How do we treat that in terms of the stories?
and that is, so my thought on that, because I did absolutely consider that. When you look around at the commercial spaces, how deep does a commercial space really need to be? If you're not Hannaford,
Yeah.
you don't need more than 50 feet of commercial space, depth, really. Most of the places that are successful, that's their size,
At
right?
best, yeah.
So if you're putting in a building that's 150 or 200 feet deep, I mean, how much useful commercial are you going to have in the back of the building? The people aren't going to be going back there for that. A better use for it would be as parking.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason we're putting multi-unit in as opposed to mixed use, right? Because we're talking about two different things now, right? When the rules went in for mixed use at the beginning, 10, 12 years ago, it was before my time. I feel there was a desire for more commerce to be coming to town, right? But what we're seeing right now is we have vacant spaces. We have more commerce space than we can use, which is why we're looking at pure multi-units now in these surrounding areas. So I would think that we should look at whether it's a recommendation we put in with this. I think it should be a recommendation, but not one that
Not a deal
necessarily
breaker.
has to go along with this particular change. That we reconsider how much commercial needs to be included in our mixed-use build-outs.
So we've seen, there's a couple of existing developments in town with the parking on the first floor, right, and bedrooms above. The proposal that was put forward for Mill Plaza consisted of something similar to that, with parking on the first floor and bedrooms above. Would we see that parking as a commercial use if they're charging their tenants or the public money to be there?
Well, if they're charging the public to be there, yes, definitely. If it's
If it's just tenant occupied,
It's just
then
tenant
no?
occupied, I would say no, it's an
It would
accessory
be an
use.
accessory use.
So how many stories can I go up if I'm doing that? I've got parking on my first floor, and I got no business in the building
Well,
other than
It could depend on
apartments.
what their ability to go under as well.
I'm just wondering, how many stories am I getting then? If I've got no commercial and I'm just looking to put bedrooms?
And you have no, well,
You can have a parking
ideally,
lot,
we'd prefer, yeah, but
or there could be underground space too.
I
Depends on the
prefer
But
to
we're
see
saying 4
cars in
stories,
the
right?
buildings as opposed to on a parking lot.
Parking lot, yeah.
It's a good question. I don't have a solid answer for that because I think it's going to depend a little bit on how we handle that in our site plan reviews.
Okay.
I mean, for multi-units, is it still one parking space per?
You could go down.
So
Let's see, it was changed per the state law.
I believe we went to one per.
That is my recollection.
We're at
One
one
parking
per.
space per dwelling unit is what a multi-unit would have to provide.
Wasn't there a state?
And I would, And is your so I'm not sure if your question is, are we going to leave what the configuration of that parking is up to the developer, or do we want to mandate whether it's external or internal parking?
Yeah, SB 284, I don't know the status of it, but as municipalities shall not set the maximum residential parking spaces per unit to more than one parking space per residential unit.
Yeah,
If it's more
we got,
than 10
we
units.
jumped ahead. Last year, they made it 1.5, and when we had it here, we went to
Yeah,
one.
they went, yeah, they're moving it down.
So we can ignore that change
yeah.
in Concord.
Could I respond to the student housing issue?
Please.
Okay. Obviously, that's a very live point based on the public comments we received, not wanting to create so much student density downtown that the objective of having a more diverse services and more diverse commercial activity is undermined by businesses just filling the demand for bars and other places that would be attractive to a high density of students. Okay. The argument that, we should permit it because it's not going to pencil out right now, I think the counter argument that some of the members of the public would advance, if were they here, would be, that's now, but we're creating a zoning change that will last well into the future, so we shouldn't be approving something we don't want based on a present economic condition that could change. I think that's what they would say, or someone said something like that. I will say that while I think that's right to an extent, I think we need to be honest with the fact that there are going to be trade-offs. We can't provide an absolute assurance that, an undergraduate student won't rent a 2-bedroom apartment, right? But we can note that the economics of that, I'm skeptical that it will be an overwhelming concentration of undergraduate students, in part because of the 2-year dorm residency requirement that's in place right now at UNH. I don't see why UNH is going to, I know I saw the email exchange with some developers, their lamentations about that because it's hurting the student housing market, but I can't imagine why UNH would pay any attention to their lamentations about it.
True.
Yeah, they've,
And so I think the reality is there's a very large population of students in this college town. If we're going to take steps to increase available housing, it's going to be done by increasing supply. It's going to be done by increasing supply, and increasing supply is not going to be a process that's entirely controllable through zoning laws. That's my take on it, and I come out thinking that if we do it right and put it in the right place, I mean, this is not exactly what's there now. It's not exactly like there's no students there. We would be increasing the density of population, and the type of unit would be, I think the type of unit that the study that was done last year would be probably 2-bedroom, 2-bath,
More
multifamily
likely.
predominantly, right?
Easy to rent.
Yeah, because that's the easiest to rent, and it's the easiest to rent to the kind of people that we hope to bring in and hope to help find more housing.
I think the one
He
thing
had
that
his
I...
hand up. Oh,
Manish?
Yeah, yes, I may not be thinking about this right, but I'll share my thoughts anyways. I think that, just hearing everybody and going through the material, I think that while we preserve sort of the vibe of downtown, preserve the character, and at the same time, make it more vibrant, increase the density to everyone's point, and focus the density in sort of the downtown area, seems to be lots of merits to it, I think the one thing that's not resonating with me, and it might be how I'm thinking about it, is sort of, I was reflecting on what Peyton said just now, that when we do that with 41% of the emissions in 2022, I believe, were related to transportation. And again, to me, I think those two would be not adversely correlated, but positively correlated, because in my mind, if we create, dwelling housing units and, one person, say 2 people per a 2-bedroom condo, whatever it is, I think the transportation will go up, because in my mind, the way I'm thinking about it is that the transportation emissions are created not so much by people driving within Durham. Durham's a small town, but it's between people coming in and out of Durham. So again, I don't know what I don't know, but I think that correlation, if we make the downtown more vibrant, more housing, more businesses, and expect that emissions to go away, that may be, that at least in my mind, I'm not seeing the correlation there, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that one.
I'm personally unclear on exactly how that value is calculated, and that would be a good thing if we get the fellow in to speak on that and explain how all those carbon emissions are actually calculated. Because I think it's not just people coming in and out, but I think people passing through. So all the
Having
traffic
cars.
on Route 4 counts against our emissions.
One away heading to Newmarket.
And one away.
Yeah, there's a
So-
lot, there's a
So
lot.
there's,
But
I mean, there's transportation may be high, but I'm.
you also still get a lot of
the thing-
commuters coming to UNH.
I would move to the one next to transportation, to housing. So notice the number 2 emission is housing. And that's because single-family houses are the most inefficient to heat. And they create the hardest, whereas multi-units allow you to reduce your housing footprint when it comes to your heating and cooling and
Right.
the carbon emissions. So it still works.
And then just one point to that, I believe that UNH is the largest employer in the area. So you have an awful lot of people that are essentially commuting in from out of town.
To
or
UNH.
To UNH.
And
So
so
the
that-
idea that you could live downtown and that
Fair.
you could essentially walk or bike there is very attractive, and that you could walk and bike to other services as well. So that if you need to do a basic service, you don't need to get in your car and drive 2 miles
Oh,
to
that's
go.
a fair point.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that's-
yeah, and in fact, that's exactly what I do. Once I moved to Durham, I let my university parking permit lapse because I didn't need it anymore.
Because you're right in the middle of it.
Well,
So
and we know that some of the younger professors coming in at the time, a few years ago,
Yes,
they
they
couldn't
chose.
find
They
housing
can't, right.
in town,
Okay.
so.
So, and I
Yeah.
have, there's one thing I haven't heard in this discussion for as long as it's been going on for the last couple of years, really. And that is that there is a finite number of students. If you really want to change the ratio of year-round residents to students, you're only going to do that by creating housing
Yeah.
for those year-round residents to come in and change the ratio.
Yeah.
If you're afraid to build the housing, because, I mean, we already have 10,000 students or whatever living in town,
Right.
right? And you have to count the dormitories on campus as living in town,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? We've pretty much saturated the market there. There are still some that live and remain, but not many.
There's no other options.
It's just a matter of, if we keep building, then we'll be able to get year-round residents who work at the university or other places in town here.
Yeah. We've already,
I mean,
we've
there's-
already dropped the buses to Newmarket because there are no longer enough students
Exactly.
going out to Newmarket to find housing.
I interviewed a Hannaford employee who's driving up from Derry every day because it's cheaper to put gas in the car than it is to try to live here.
It's just, yeah,
Can I just-
Yeah, you
Oh,
go.
I haven't had.
No, you go.
So when I looked at all of the different locations, the PO and, again, Courthouse and Churchill, the majority of the housing that is there already is student housing. And I think the point is there's enough of those, there's properties in each of those clusters that at some point could transition away from student housing. Or you have older buildings that I would not call.
Could retrofit or
Yeah,
change out.
or could be tear downs, depending on,
They could
you
see
know,
the
what lot
market,
you're
yeah.
looking at. And the point is right now, in our zoning, we have, those people that might be interested in doing that can't unless they want to build it as senior multi-unit developments. So putting in place this change in the zoning amendment gives us a future to look at. Right now, it's clogged with student housing, but it never will change if we don't make this change now, because we're limiting our ability to expand and allow people into those neighborhoods. Because right now, all you have is a, pre-existing approval of some sort from way back when, and we're not allowing our normal grouping of people into those areas. We're missing everything from, it's great at this end where you've got everything from up to, 21 years old, and you've got 55 and over, and we have no ability in those areas to build housing for people in that middle area. So that's to me why
Can I add just one real quick thing?
Beat it to death, but go ahead.
Well, no, this is about businesses, because I've heard people say student-focused, student-centered businesses, and we had some comments about the businesses downtown, that it's all just about students. Well, when you walk downtown, first of all, in those developments or those buildings that have been redeveloped, we have quality retail space. And if you stop and look at what is in those spaces, they're all multi-generational. We have Rise and Grind, we have Hop and Grind, we have the Juicery, the Soupery, we have Amy's Frames is in a redeveloped area. The restaurants, where Big Bean was, where the sushi place, all those are part of redeveloped quality, Polly's on it, building on the corner there. Those all have quality retail space that are filled with multi-generational businesses. Now, people say, oh, we have tattoos. Well, I talked to tattoo artists. Tattoos are not a student-focused thing. We have hair salons. We have these things. So we have to look at what we can bring in. With clientele that is less student-centered, we can bring in more options for people. But the reality is, we're not a town that is filled with just student businesses. They're all multi-generational. We could probably use less convenience stores, but
So in this
That's your
context,
problem.
what we're trying to do is we're trying to change it so something else gets built. So what do you picture getting built in any of these districts?
well,
from
these
this
districts
change?
would be multi-unit housing.
And where? One of the questions was like, what do we think is going to happen? What kind of projects would we likely see? So what do we think is going to happen if we change this in PO? Couple lots, flip to bigger buildings?
Yeah. Well, in PO,
Or-
In PO.
I don't know if this will have, if there'll be any immediate jump. The only thing in PO that might go would be Mathis Court. This would allow Mathis Court to redevelop. That's all owned by one person right now.
The Coops, that one, the blue one?
It might encourage.
Oh, no, Mathis Court.
Mathis Court, the dentist.
The four,
Some of the,
So you got that yellow building up front on Medbury Road, and then
Right, yeah.
I only have 1 year, so I can't try.
I think that's very unlikely.
okay.
That one.
But in
The-
PO, I think that's the only, because everything else in PO has recently been redeveloped.
well, what about the older apartment
There's
buildings?
single-family
They have
homes
some couple of them
on
that are-
Woodman.
There's
There's
some
two
old ones,
single-family
yeah.
homes on Woodman that could get knocked down and get built big.
And what about the,
There's two
Yeah.
right across
The
from
larger-
the sports field.
Madbury Commons owns some of the older units there that are older apartments. They might choose to.
So in PO,
might,
we
yeah.
think 4 properties might.
It really depends on what the current maintenance, I haven't been inside the buildings. I don't know where they
they
are in their
wanna do.
maintenance lives. But if you've got a property that's distressed, it's more likely to go first. And I think the single-family homes that you mentioned on Woodman may well be the first.
So
but
all of
I don't
those are
know.
like $600,000 properties. Do we think those will be purchased and knocked down and built with like a quadplex on it?
Or the current owner, I'm not sure who the current owners are, but it's probably some of the, I wouldn't be surprised if they're part of the current landlords who own, quite a few properties in town.
And the reason I'm
They could do
asking the
that.
question is we know there's a lot of things we
Alright.
want to cascade in the town that are positive from this. And I'm looking at PO and saying, is it realistic that things are going to change there? And does anybody have insight into that?
Well, there's a difference between what I see happening short-term and then
What could happen?
what my wishes would be for the longer term, which is, everything gets updated. And if
could-
things get updated, then they could be rebuilt from their current formats into something that's more efficient.
They could see the benefit of, right now you have a lot of buildings that are like 4 bedrooms, 3, 4,
But-
5 and 6 bedrooms. And some of those older buildings, they could see the advantage of changing some of that out and turning it into more market-friendly apartment buildings where anybody could.
Okay, so what happens in Churchill?
Churchill?
Can I just go back to that, and then, because I agree we need to cover Churchill. Just one point on that. It's really difficult to anticipate exactly what will happen, because a lot of times the person who's taking that risk is taking a risk that is slightly unexpected, and if everyone saw it, they would do it. I remember when I was down in the Merritt building, which is, the old 2-story building right on Pettybrook, and West Merritt bought that small yellow building on the corner that then has been built up. And at the time, it was just a little single-family yellow building, and he bought it. And I think he thought he overpaid, and then someone came in and offered him an outrageous amount of money, and he said, "That's crazy, who would ever pay that?" And, we're all local, we work downtown the whole time. And then they held out, and then that number kept going up, and then he was like, well, the number got crazy, and then I sold. And so it was difficult to have that vision of what you would do, but the person that was buying that had a pretty clear idea. But I think what they needed to have a low risk model that they could go in and they could understand that if they did that, they could build it out. So it's very difficult I think, for us to always say what would happen, because a lot of times we're not thinking about, okay, we'll consolidate 2 lots and build out something, or, we have the idea of exactly what's going to take place. But for certain types of people that are putting their money at risk and that are, used to doing this, they might have a different vision. So it's sometimes complicated to know which lots, and it also is going to depend on what happens down the road as well. So I would just say it's very difficult for us to anticipate, but I think what you want to do is you want to provide a structure where someone could take that and have a fairly high degree of certainty what's going to take place if they put their, sort of money at risk there.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that happens in PO, does it matter if college kids move in there? That's one of the questions on our briefing thing.
In
Well-
PO? No, PO is 90% students
It's already
already.
there.
Okay.
I mean, PO,
It's mostly college, it's all college.
it may well
It's
be
almost-
99% students, if not 100% students.
So the argument for is that
Except
this,
for the senior housing.
which is newly built out and probably won't expand,
Yeah, I think it's
so
lost its-
that's a great buffer, the school's a great buffer. Does it matter if more college kids move into that neighborhood? Are there enough buffers for the neighborhood? And does anybody think there's not enough buffer?
Well, I mean, if the college students do move into this area, then that frees up rental housing elsewhere in town for non-students. And if there aren't enough
As
undergrads to take these demand, then we have it available for non-students, which,
As an
Would help us.
abutter, may I speak?
yes.
You are in a butter.
Yes, as an abutter, I would love to see it happen, because I'd much rather have the managed property go in there, because they're a lot less troublesome than some of the properties that are there now.
Okay. I think that's a good argument for it.
Yes,
Adult supervision will
The-
be present
yes.
Well,
by
the-
professionals.
The rules that you go by when you live in a apartment building are a lot
The
different. than
parties
if
would
you're-
end at
yeah,
midnight.
Yeah.
So then the other,
I think the way to look
And they wouldn't even actually be parties.
Right.
Out on the yard because they're not allowed.
I think the way that Heather's looking at it is really spot on. If you want to, and also Paul's argument, really it's the same argument. If you want to change the town so that there are more year-round non-student residents, and the primary reason they're not here is because of constraints on the housing supply, and you want the housing supply to be close to the central business district, then you can't provide an absolute assurance that someone, that students won't rent, those units, but you can provide a forecast that by increasing the housing supply of units that are not specifically tailored to students and making it, you're more likely, you're taking the only way forward to achieve the long-term planning goal. The only viable way forward of increased density is to increase the housing supply. And if I walk around, when I walk around and I look at these neighborhoods, this is where it must be,
Well, it's, yeah,
right? I mean,
All
so
right,
it's pretty
so are
simple
we-
in that
totally
way.
agree.
Are we ready to move to Churchill? All right, Churchill. So the big monkey in the wrench here, or elephant in the room would be the
buffer zone,
Red Tower property.
yeah. A buffer.
So I want to first
Didn't we-
make a statement on this. We're a planning board. Part of what we're doing is we're planning for the future. Are we going to let, from a smart growth perspective, we have a vision. The vision is the increased density. It may be hard to swallow, but that means in some cases that if you have inappropriate structures, the expectation is they will get replaced. You don't let a couple of poorly placed single-family homes suddenly put a big gap in your smart growth plan. And that's what we're looking at in Church Hill. So you got a couple of really poorly placed single-family homes, which in any sort of long-term plan shouldn't be there. And we're asking how to protect them. And I actually don't believe we should be trying to bend over backwards to protect them.
I think as long as you respect the buffers. And I think that that's the biggest issue, is they have their homes there, they're in this little nook, this little tiny niche. But right now, that property is approved in zoning today to put multi-unit housing.
Yeah.
It just can't be a 40-year-old.
senior multi-unit housing.
Senior house is the
Yeah.
only you can put in.
And
And you can put light industrial.
and you can put light industrial.
Senior or light industrial.
And a senior care facility, which gets a lot of traffic and has
But anyway.
parking, and has parking.
Paul?
Go ahead, Richard. Sorry.
Arts center, daycare center, a library, a museum, religious use activities. Those are all allowed right now by right.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. The other thing that we got to remember is that there's going to be a line somewhere between our commercial districts and our residential districts. And whether it's at this location, or we could go on the other side of Main Street, there is going to be ultimately a line between one lot and the other, and one's going to be zoned one way and one's going to be zoned the other.
Like,
I don't necessarily have any holdups regarding Churchill. I think that it actually offers probably the best opportunity for that sort of development with current ownership and
And the fact that you have two landlocked lots there?
yeah, and the
Some
lot
older-
sizes.
And some very older, not well-maintained homes.
We would, for professional office to flip the way we see it, I think we'd need to see some of those fraternity or sororities leave town, you know,
It'd be
because,
interesting to understand how that behavior starts, whether it does change.
yeah,
Because
they
there's
have
also
the
a
bigger
huge-
lots that could even utilize some of that existing, you know, architecture to expand
Same
or
with that
reuse.
Stratford Ave. I mean, that's another perfect location with some aging buildings that could be converted. Anyway,
Well,
yeah,
yeah. I don't.
who knows?
I don't know what the ownership is on Stratford Ave.
It's all fraternity
It's all
owned,
frats. It's all frats and sororities.
LLCs or whatever. I looked every one of them up.
Okay.
I've got a question. The development that I think Peyton was talking about that we see, and I forget the name of it. It's the large units went out behind, and this is on Main Street. It's in central business, right? And it,
Oh, the Orion?
yes, that's what it was,
That
right?
one, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they
Torrington.
preserved the smaller buildings in the front, other than they sent one of them up too high, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Just missed it by a little. But are we seeing businesses in the first floor of those?
There's
'Cause-
insurance, there's insurance.
But is it just one business in
There's
one of the
and
buildings?
I think it's also the rental office.
Right.
It's their rental.
Is a second
It's
one,
no,
but-
it's not,
So
not hot
we can't
commercial
fill those
No.
spaces.
they would have been better off being used as rental space, to be
Okay.
honest with you.
Thanks. Yes, I've got no problem with Churchill.
All right.
Can I, just on the Churchill, just because it was brought up in the earlier meeting a few times, that I believe that there was an attempt to view Churchill earlier, and Neil Nyman's was brought up, that there was an attempt to look at Churchill maybe in a similar way, and then also the parking that was proposed there, that then, so is the concern with Churchill that there would be, that would create a situation that makes the rest of this not doable?
Well, you could get pushback.
I guess that's sort of the question is,
Yeah,
I understand why, I understand geographically why the people that are opposed to the development in Churchill are opposed to it. And then it's a question of, you know,
right, right. And there are some legitimate concerns from the abutters on Chesley Drive about what happens on the part of Churchill that they're next to.
right.
That, I can understand why they'd be reluctant to see development in that part of Church Hill, because that's going to have a big visual impact on them. But it would be a vast improvement over a parking lot.
Right.
And you could have something akin to a smaller version of Riverwoods there right now. Somebody could build that starting this week. Senior housing multi-unit permitted by right.
In fact, the requirement, I believe, in the district is put the parking in the back.
Yeah. And so
Yes.
they would
So-
have, yeah, they would have parking no matter what in their backyard.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes. Because the front of, there's no frontage in the front of the property to put parking.
And a senior-
The odd part about that is it's so set off the
So-
road.
Yeah, well,
I
the,
know.
It
You
doesn't,
could put some.
you could, but you can't.
all right, so the, did we cover that bullet point to your satisfaction?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted you to talk about it.
We do.
All right, any suggestions for the town council regarding this amendment?
I would imagine the town council during their public hearing will get probably some
I have-
conversations from the community.
I have one I would like to suggest. Doesn't have to be as part of this, but I think it's something we're going to need to have done.
What?
In the table of uses, I really would like to see CB1 and CB2 as two separate columns.
Oh, we need that as two separate columns. It's going to be
All right?
very confusing
Because once we start
otherwise.
changing uses between the two, then it's going to become unmanageable by a note.
It's going to be very
Right.
confusing, yeah. And it will be confusing just seeing it, if somebody that doesn't understand what it is. We know what it is, but somebody could be like, what is that?
Do you, do you want to suggest that as part of this to make that change?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it'd be it's a simple enough change. It's simply a layout change. It's something you could present as an option to them that they
Sure.
could perform.
Did I miss 3-story, or we haven't gone?
We haven't
yet?
got there
Moving
yet.
to that now. Okay.
All right, so, so your recommendation
Oh, we need
is
to
to...
vote.
Yeah, we need to
Oh, all
vote
right.
on it.
But your recommendation is to go forward and just one minor adjustment with CB1 and CB2?
Layout in
Yeah.
the table of uses.
Yeah, we need to formally vote on that, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, of course.
Oh, wait, Heather just left the room.
Heather just left the room. So I will
Give it a sec.
give it a sec and, so,
Make a motion.
so the minimum lot sizes per dwelling units for the 3 zones that are being affected are not all in line. Does that bother anybody? That PO is allowed a denser use than the others?
Oh, no.
Not particularly,
No.
no. I mean, I see no compelling reason why they have to be the same.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I'm not gonna wait much longer. After all, we have, I could have Counselor Lund vote.
As long as they're voting the same, as long as they're voting the same way,
So,
I guess.
does somebody want to make a motion, or are you gonna have me do it?
What is the appropriate motion, actually? It's been a while since.
Yeah.
Is it to endorse, or what are we doing?
Endorse, support, recommend
Initiate.
adoption.
Yeah,
It's
support.
initiated by someone else, though.
Yes. so
It's
we're-
initiated by
we're
the
going-
town council.
We are endorsing the
Endorsement.
change as presented and providing, and then providing a recommendation with regarding the table of uses.
Okay.
Or
So
recommendations, or with.
I'm going to try to make a
appropriate
motion then, that we endorse this was council initiated?
Yes.
The council initiated proposed zoning amendment, multi-unit residential. This was to allow multi-unit residential and professional office, Church Hill, in the courthouse districts by right. And along with that, to endorse the changes to our table of uses.
Second that?
Seconded by Councilor Graham. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
As unanimous, opposed? Nobody's opposed. All right. Very good, great.
You're the best.
All right. Proposed zoning amendment, 3-story height limit. The public hearing has already been closed. Proposed amendment to remove the 3-story height limitation in sections of the central business district and to allow 4 floors of residential with only 1 floor of commercial on the first floor and a 5-story building in the CBD. Presently, a 5-story building in the CBD must contain at least 2 floors of commercial. First item was initiated by the town council on March 17th.
I think it's worth clarifying here that here we mean what will be CB1 and not CB2, which is intended to.
Right, it will be in
Yes. That was-
CB1.
Oh, the
Yes.
CB1, oh, there
That
was a
was-
typo.
CB2 stays.
Right, thank you, yeah.
May I request that Michael clarify something for me from the town planner's review?
Please request your clarification.
Michael, the proposed zoning amendment is described as allowing 1 floor of commercial, 4 floors of residential, and a 5-story building. But in the initial introductory Roman 5. But on the third paragraph down, it says you can build 4 stories by right and by conditional use to 5 stories with some required setbacks. And if the 3-story limitation is removed, then this same standard for the rest of the central business district would apply to these sections of Main Street and Madbury Road. So I'm asking for a resolution of what I perceive to be an ambiguity as to whether that 5th floor would be available only as a conditional use, or would be available by right without a conditional use.
So it would be available by conditional use, because that's what it is for the rest of the
downtown.
central business.
Okay, I
And
just
the
want to be
council, along with the
100% clear that while we understand what we're talking about here. That's a
Right.
big, that one floor is a big difference.
And then the one other change that the council made, along with the 3 stories, removing that, is that presently, if you do get a conditional use for a 5th floor, you have to have a total of 2 floors of commercial.
I understand
And
that
it's
part.
also
yeah.
removing that, so just 1 floor.
Yeah, it's removing that.
All right.
Because they don't need the commercial.
So, basically, all the reasons we're doing this are the same as the reasons for the loan why we were using multi-unit. This whole idea of being able to bring in appropriate density into the CBD. I do have some changes that I would prefer to have made before, so I was just wondering if
What
people wanted to comment, have their comments first, or whether you wanted to hear my suggestions, since some of them might circumvent some of your concerns.
Does anybody have anything?
Well,
Hey, you made some good points in,
Well, when I was looking at it, I sort of stepped back a little bit, and I started thinking about Durham as a whole. And so as I started thinking about Durham as a whole, I started to wonder, what are the building heights or buildings floor counts that UNH has, to think if it was, downtown was out of character given the rest of the town. So it seemed to be reasonable to collect some data from UNH to say, how many buildings do you have, and then what are their number of floors on the buildings? And then look at that distribution.
This information was provided to us.
Right, so that was interesting, because they have 156 buildings, and a lot of those are substantial number of floors, with 29% of 5 or more floors and 43% are 4 or more floors. So there are a lot of rather significant buildings across town on the UNH campus already. So I thought that was interesting. The other was, I did do a write-up just to, basically just combining all those and looking at that 3-story kind of zone that's there. And it seems to me to be very reasonable. I think when I think about it now, I think the downtown is out of character given the size of the buildings with the rest of the building counts that are already in Durham. So I think the downtown itself is the outlier, if I start to think about that a little bit more, and that it's very reasonable as we consider density and as we consider people being close to services to allow those heights to expand.
and I would add that the properties that are in the most dire shape and are the single-story ones. We have an empty property on Jenkins Court that's single-story that is very old, and it's very old and fallen down, and it's very difficult to rent. They can't rent it because of the shape, and also because of the nature of many of the rents that are in the downtown. Many of the landlords rent triple net, which means they're responsible for all the maintenance as well, and these would just become cumbersome for anybody to rent. The middle core of our downtown is, where Young's or, Clark's now stands. That's almost an iconic look. And where Hayden Sports, Roger Hayden owns quite a bit of property there. He actually has it on the market now. And I was talking to him last week, and he did say that he's had a lot of interest, but what many of the people that are interested in purchasing have said, yeah, but Durham They don't really welcome change. So they have been put off by the conditional use aspect of it and the height limitations. And so we have been making those changes. But he put together a plan several years ago, actually him and Kenny Young and the Petroviches, which is Durham House Pizza, and Jay Michael, who did own where the gaming store is right now, virtual reality store. And they had a four-story building that they put together, and they were going to tear down what they had, and they kept that iconic look of Young's in the middle, and they built up a four-story with all new retail on the bottom, and they did present it to the town employees and town council. We all met at Kenny Young's restaurant. This was before COVID, and it was. And Michael, you probably remembered. It wasn't. It didn't push the town to change zoning at the time. It's an unfortunate because that would probably be redeveloped now. The cost was a lot cheaper to redevelop then versus what it would be now. We'd have 4 stories of new retail and living upstairs. But it is in a part that would be 4 stories that looks out into nothing. It looks out into our little park and then down Mill Road. So there is no canyon effect there because there's nothing there but air. And but it would be then consistent with some of the other buildings that are there and some of the other buildings going forward, especially once the corner of Pettybrook and Main gets redeveloped. So I would agree with Peyton that there are certain aspects of downtown that are out of step with the rest of what town should be and are in dire need of redevelopment. Single-story buildings in a downtown is just not good business.
Richard?
Sure. So, did you all see the Mind the Gap presentation?
Oh, yeah.
I was rather attracted to the developed photo montage that he had put together. Nothing about it necessarily alarmed me, and in part, it's because, as you say, Sally, it's looking over that triangle and the Memorial Park there.
It is almost
A gateway.
representative. No, if you think about it, is
It's a
exactly what
picture.
Thompson Hall does,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's a
Thompson
landmark.
Hall is so iconic, you could have a wonderfully iconic building there going down,
Yeah,
facing
indeed.
down Mills
could
Road.
create a new historical building.
Well, I had the same reaction is that I looked at it, I knew I was supposed to be just aghast at the appearance, but I just wasn't, and, but to me, there's a big difference between 4 stories and 5 stories. If it's 5 stories, if you look at Newmarket, a lot of it's 4 stories, and you don't really get a sense of it's some kind of concrete canyon or anything like that. It's quite attractive, really. Downtown Newmarket, it's really quite nice. So if that's what we're doing, that's what they have as of right, 4 stories. My
Right.
question then becomes, are the architectural controls that we have built into the zoning as now constituted sufficient so that as part of the issuance of the building permit or the site plan approval, we can give the town sufficient assurance that the character of that one little strip, which is pretty, and that should be preserved, I think, and I think that's a reasonable requirement. That's probably what Paul was about to propose.
Basically, yes. What I was going to propose was sort of dealing with, because the big concern that everybody has, it's going to be 5 stories.
Well,
Right.
stories is set.
I want, and we all hate conditional use. So if anybody coming in with 5, it's going to be a conditional use. It's going to take us a year to get something approved.
They're not going to
I
come in
want to
with 50.
adopt this with the recommendation that we remove the 5-story option. And that we follow up, preferably by a town council subcommittee, maybe led by Joe Lieberman, and Peyton might maybe want.
Joe Friedman.
Joe Friedman, sorry. and maybe some, with a couple of people, council members, a couple of people from the board, that we then look, and just like we're trying to remove a 3-story limit, we take a look at the CBD and say, where does 5-story make sense? And we specifically
And then make it
approve
5-story.
5-story throughout the area where it makes sense.
That would make more sense, because.
And that way we get rid of conditional use, we get rid of all this, can I do it, can I not do it, stuff that the developers hate.
Well, the 5th story would be by conditional use, which again, you've got 4 stories. In my opinion, it would not be something I would push for.
I don't want to
But
be
the reason why
sitting
we
in this
did
chair with a
that.
5-story option coming in front of me as a
Right,
conditional
but
use.
the reason why we even put that 5th story was it was before COVID. On the council,
timeline.
when we brought that, I mean, you remember Michael and Al, I, and you know, oh my gosh, Jim Lawson brought forth to add that in the hopes that we could get some more density downtown. And it didn't really work out. It wasn't enough. It wasn't near enough. And what we needed to do is what we're doing
And-
here.
Yeah, well, what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, that's nice
just get
history,
rid of it.
but the conditional use mechanism doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
And that,
I would agree.
but I think that by pre-approving certain, locations for the 5th story, and I'm generally thinking here, all those things that border the university property, right?
Yeah.
All those things, you could go to 5 stories, nobody's going to care. In fact, we said that when 76 Main Street was here. That'd make a great 5-story building.
What's the corner of Main and Pettibrook? That's 4? The one that's we approved that hasn't been built yet?
4.
That's a 4. So
It
the,
got left at 4 because the 5th story, again, was going to have to be set back, and for a corner lot to have to be set back on both,
You had
the building that
nothing.
side.
You had nothing.
The 5th story would have been a
Yeah.
postage stamp on top
Yeah.
of his roof. It wouldn't have made sense at all.
so we could pinpoint,
And that is the point, is that it would be the one place in the CBD where you don't need them set back. That
wouldn't
5th
need
floor
it,
wouldn't
yeah,
need to be
surrounded
set
by
back, it'd be,
yeah.
because you're right next to Holloway Commons,
you're next to the
and
map.
across the street from Alexander.
Can I just ask a question on that? So would that be like another district, or would you just have lots
No,
where
we
you
could
designate?
pinpoint
Just like
lots.
we're removing this
You could
list of
just
things
add
that
a
are
list of
limited to
lots,
threes.
and that would be by right, 5 stories by right.
Yeah, so like we pinpointed where it was limited to 3, we could pinpoint where it's allowed to 5.
Because when I was looking at it, I actually wasn't a huge fan of conditional use, just because it adds a lot of complexity. And then
Yeah,
on the
we
5th
do
floor, I didn't understand the driver to have that 5th floor set back additionally as well. I've looked at a lot of 5-story buildings, and I didn't see the driver to have that 5th floor necessarily set back from the rest of the floor. So that was another thing with me. But with the idea and so I was sort of inclined to go 5 floors everywhere. But if you said 4 and then you sort of created a band where 5 floors
5
are
would be
permitted,
okay.
that seems like a reasonable approach to me. And you are already, in a lot of cases, you're already butting up against buildings that are at least as significant in size. So I think that's a pretty good idea.
We just have to figure out where that would be.
Which is why I would leave it to a subcommittee to handle after,
Yeah.
in the near future, hopefully. But
We'll let them talk about it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
Do you want to make that
Make that as a
suggestion, though, to-
recommended.
I do want to make that suggestion. I'm putting that suggestion out, and if we have approval with the board, I don't know how suggestions have to make, whether just one of us could make it, or whether we should have a consensus of the board, but I would think we'd want a consensus.
All part of the motion if people support it. Do you want to suggest that along with adopting this, that the council remove that 5th floor now?
Yes.
I don't think it's not going to gain them anything.
Can I?
That is,
What, the 5th floor or the removal of the 5th floor?
The 5th floor by conditional use.
Yeah.
I think most would just grab their 4 floors and leave.
I also think you eliminate a big part of the
Thanks.
potential aesthetic problem. That 5th floor, it's a significant
Well,
difference.
It is set back quite a ways, and the reason for that setback was to lessen the impact of the visual impact from Main Street. And that was why, we originally had it there, but we had to step it back because of the concern of being able to see
I
5
mean, I
stories.
was
Tunneling.
just one more, just before we do that. You know, like I was driving around on Google Maps today in
Yeah.
a lot of areas that I consider sort of aesthetically pleasing. Newbury Street in Boston was one, and I didn't see fifth floor setbacks, and I was like, well, that seems like could be a best practice approach, or South
was
Boston, South End, Back Bay also didn't see that approach.
It was,
So, and then on that, I guess it's a challenge, though, to the earlier discussion that we had about knowing which lots would convert. Sometimes when we're looking at that sort of data-driven or analytically, we might have an idea of which lots would make sense to be 5 stories, but someone else that's looking at it from a different perspective that is in the business might look at that and say, well, no, actually the 5th floor makes sense here. And then the
Yeah.
conditional use would allow them the flexibility to have their creativity at play and say, oh, that 5th floor actually makes sense here and not where you guys are proposing it, even though you have best intentions. So sometimes I think it's maybe difficult to overthink for someone when they're in the business and they're spending, that's their profession, and they're risking their money, which is their, time and a lot of other effort. They might have a better instinct on that. So
They have access to
data,
resources and
history.
expertise.
Yeah, but
and-
in the end, if you allow it only by conditional use,
they're not going to let
then it doesn't matter how good they know their idea is, it has to get past us and the public.
And it costs them
And-
more money.
And I just,
It has such a chilling effect, it might as well not be there, is what
I
you're
think,
saying.
Yeah.
I think if you do a CU, it's like another $100,000 to try and get it through an approval process. Some crazy.
you're talking,
amount.
you're easily talking another 4 or 5 meetings extra.
Easy.
And that's assuming it goes through smoothly.
And it may
But
not.
they can just say, I don't want to do that and stay with 4 floors. Peyton's arguing
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the option.
Yes.
Well, that is my
I
argument is if they understand that 4 is by right, and then they want to do the 5th for some reason that they know that I can't imagine, but they might, then they can sort of introduce that risk into their system, and that it is a risk, but they might have some really compelling reason to do it that I haven't thought about when people are lotting these things out. So that's why I would sort of be inclined to keep it on as an available option to them if they have some reason that they can demonstrate that's terrific. I guess it makes sense. Why remove that option? They know the risk. They
Yeah.
might, maybe you're watching these as well. That just,
It doesn't hurt to.
I mean,
keep it in.
That's a
it
reasonable-
doesn't
that's a
hurt
reasonable
anything to
argument.
leave it in, I just,
But
I mean,
highlighting specifically,
potentially, we could leave it in and still put in
Yeah.
the places where it's
Yeah.
allowed by right.
Yeah,
And
right.
still leave it as conditional use
Yeah.
elsewhere. I just don't think it's ever going to get used.
well, I
I
think,
think that's a good idea, though. If we leave it as is and still have the committee to try and figure out which one could be by right, that way we're not sort of stopping it right now, and you're still allowing
you're still
a thought
allowing it.
process
All
to
right.
move forward.
You can
I
include
can
that
work
as
with
just
that.
a comment, a recommendation that we do this in the near future.
Yeah, that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So the recommendation will be, will be pass as is and provide, have a subcommittee take a look at trying to find places for both.
The best
Right.
places.
The only thing is when
By
you,
right.
when you do that, it's going to have to be a cohesive area, just like
You're-
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And-
otherwise it'll
Yeah.
be spot zone.
So I went and I stood in that little park that was the point of view of Professor Meyerowitz's depiction, and I tried to envision, what might happen there. And when I looked at when I think about the overall tenor of what we're doing, increasing density, and I think about the volume of space, and having read the study that was done, this strip along Main Street has a much higher sort of aesthetic value to the town and the nature of the downtown than it does an immediate dramatic impact on the number of housing units. It's so much there's so much less available to do there, and so much less seems feasible in terms of the number of units that would end up along that one Main Street area. So I guess I go back to my question, do we have enough assurance here that we have some control over what gets, can we assure the public that what happens is going to be aesthetically pleasing and consistent with the downtown without adding more?
Our architecture regulations are very strong, as strong as you want. You have
They're-
lots of, they're 30-odd pages, so you have lots of control to the extent that you choose to exercise.
We don't,
You apply the
The
regulations.
central business district has a set of architectural standards that construction has to
so you're
apply to.
comfortable that
Oh,
we
yeah.
have plenty of protection there, so.
They're
so in
quite
terms of,
strict
you know,
if you
like when
want to
someone's.
use
They're
them.
over,
Yeah,
so they've been called overly strict.
But they're flexible.
They're,
I
mean, they've been
just, you know, I don't think that anyone has an economic incentive to develop it in a way that's ghastly, but I think that it's a fair comment and a fair risk for the public to want to see addressed.
Right.
And I
But
wanna
look at
make sure- so
Madbury
I'm just kind of
Commons.
just touching that base and making sure we have the assurance that, you know, we're not going to see something there and regret this night.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Well, look at Madbury Commons. That was built the way it was because of the regulations, and it was massaged through the regulations. That's the kind of result you get.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one question?
That's where we're hopping.
And it was only when I was doing the overlay. So there's an area there where the historic district overlaps with the 3-story, and I think there are like 5 or 6 lots where that takes place. What would take place where the historic district overlaps
Well, the
with?
historic district
Historic
rules do
district
occur.
trumps
Okay.
the architecture.
Which is why, if you take a look at the corner there at Madbury and Main, you have
Yeah.
lot 10. Right, so if you can picture lot 10, that's the brown clapboard building on the corner, along with that development behind it, that has the parking underneath. Okay, so because of the how, that one building was part of the historic district, so it had to be left as is.
Okay.
Whereas the rest of the lot was allowed to be developed in a more modern manner.
Okay, that was my only question, was when that overlap takes place, the historic. Okay. Thank you.
Does that mean that these buildings along Main Street, the facades couldn't change, but that it could add an additional floor?
Where does the
Even
historic?
the
We haven't
historic
had to deal with one since I've joined the board, to be honest, so.
I mean, the Orion project is in the historic district, and that was done by the HTC, and I think it's a great project. They have a fair amount of flexibility for new construction.
That's also, as was pointed out, how we got 3 buildings that are pretty much vacant right there, or two or three.
Well, that was the planning board's.
Well,
That was the zoning
no,
requirement that it be commercial.
That was
on
a
the first floor.
requirement
That's in
of the
CBD.
mixed use, yeah.
Yeah.
You had to have the mixed use, and
Yeah.
so they had to come up with something there.
Well,
It's a problematic place for a business.
That's the unfortunate reality.
I think it was the combination of having to have the business and it being,
It's on
you
the
know,
other side of this.
having to be historic approved.
There's no parking at all for
Yeah.
business, and it
But that
was
was,
just
that's
very.
not the HTC, that was the planning board's
That-
So
that-
do-
CBD
Yeah.
intention.
Do we have a plan for the town council now? Something we want to vote on that
Is
says,
there anything more? All
You
right,
probably should just review what we've agreed upon.
so what we're approving as presented and making a suggestion that a subcommittee be created to review where 5 stories should be permitted by right. Is there anything else?
But that's not going to stall any of this. It'll all be as is, and then there would be another
Yeah.
A suggestion that we're adding
suggestion that would
onto
come
it,
back
yeah.
that would say the
That's the whole
band of
point about,
lots.
we're going to approve that they pass it as
Yeah.
is, but that they follow up with the
Do you,
5
do you
stories by
think
right.
that the committee to do that should be the planning board or the, I think that would be better coming from the planning board. A committee from the planning board rather than the council.
I think it would be-
I would like it to include members of both, but it could be run by either one of us. I think right now, the town council probably has more energy to try to take it and run with it than we do, because
Put your,
for everybody's enlightenment, the Conservation Commission just dropped our new zoning ordinance for our overlay districts, our wetlands overlay districts, which is now in our queue. The hope is we get to it sometime this summer. We also have the stuff that's in our packets. Energy Committee is getting ready to drop one on us. And that's why I say I don't know how much, if we have the energy to run a committee like that.
perhaps if the council puts their two planning board members on that committee, along with maybe another 1 or 2 members of the council.
It could be a mixed committee. I'm saying
Yeah.
it should be a mixed committee,
Yeah.
is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to do it?
Did we vote on it?
No,
We gotta vote on
we
it.
haven't.
We need a motion.
A motion yet.
So, all right,
Who's kept notes?
I got it, I think.
Got it.
Okay. So I move to, what is it, what are we doing again?
Initiate.
Endorse or support.
Endorse and support, back to the town council, the amendment for the removal of the 3-story height limitation in sections of Central Business District 1. And allow 4 stories, 4 floors of residential with only 1 floor of commercial, and a 5th story by conditional use. We suggest that after passing the 3-story elimination, that we also have a subcommittee that would look at 5 by right in certain areas.
Second.
seconded by Peyton. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Excellent. All right, so this next one, all right, we'll see where this goes. If it looks like we get bogged down, we can continue it. It's really up to how we feel. So the purpose of this, when we did the student rental thing last January, I guess it was, one of the things that came out as a footnote was that we needed to follow up with a definition for lodging house. And it should be aligned with fire code. And then that would allow us to get rid of student rental, which
Didn't work out very well.
which wasn't working out very well. And I think also you should take it as a point of fact for anybody who's listening, that anything we discuss here where we're instituting any form of bias is being picked up on and conquered. The
Big time.
legislation for forbidding us from using any sort of blood relations or as a means for housing together, or limiting housing, narrowly got tabled. I believe that one got tabled too. But it will be back next year.
So we should avoid making decisions based on discrimination of certain groups of people, including college students.
So what the intent of this one is as a lodging house is by aligning the lodging house with fire code, we can then control where lodging houses belong in town. And that's the purpose of this amendment. We're adding the lodging house definition, removing some of the conflicting definitions, and then in the table of uses, striking the student rental idea and replacing it with a lodging house row. Any questions about this before we get into deliberation?
I just have one question, and that's just even the choice between lodging or rooming house. Because when I've been looking at different properties, I've clicked every button on every lot, looking at all these things going through. And we have rooming house defining properties in town versus lodging. So does just calling it lodging or rooming house make sense if that's the way it is? Why, I mean, if we already have rooming houses here, why do we want to call it a lodging house? Or should we call it
We don't want to call it a
lodging
boarding
slash
house.
rooming house?
They're all the same
We
thing.
could call it lodging/rooming house.
Just because we know we
That's what
have,
the fire code calls it, though, lodging house.
They call it a lodging house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, because why is, I was.
A lodging house
It
is
says
a-
here in definition, 3.311, lodging or rooming house involved here.
Yeah, that's true.
So I thought that's why it said that here.
Oh,
So,
oh, right.
It's a, I mean,
Boarding house, lodging house, rooming house are all the same.
I just
So-
thought since it's the same, if we just said that, because we have, if I go and I look at the assessor's database,
Already
they
made it
have,
that way.
they have them defined, they have several that are defined as rooming houses.
Should it be lodging or lodging slash rooming?
I think if it's in the code, if 3.3.199.17 is lodging or rooming house, then I would suggest that we,
Yeah, that's probably,
That was-
lodging house slash rooming house probably makes sense. And then include, under rooming house, see lodging slash rooming.
yeah, there you go. That would make sense to me.
okay.
That's all I,
Anybody else? On the table of uses, I have a suggestion. So, support houses like, battered women's shelters and things like that are going to fall into this category,
Yes.
all right? And I think we should allow them in the rural zone.
Yeah, this was just.
And that's
yeah,
because we
there's
have a
valid
couple in
reason.
town of those types of shelters that are in the rural zone. And, or shelters or, hand with fellowship with the over on,
On Route 4.
On
It
Route
was
4,
rural
which-
and RC, and RC.
in our, yeah.
R
yeah,
and-
we're-
R and
so- So
RC.
we do have some in R and RC, so I think it would be relevant for us to try to maintain them in those zones.
And it's a good
only
place for
forbid them in RA. And I thought I thought RB was,
RB and RC.
okay. So we're
I
permitting.
thought it was
RB
R and RC.
No, I'm pretty sure RB and RC. I think.
I thought it
I
was
thought
R.
the idea was to keep them out of RA and RB.
I thought it was
I
R
think so,
and
too.
RC in that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
it was
It's supposed to be
specifically.
X's for RA and RB,
Oh, okay.
and P's for R and RC.
I may have gotten confused because I was thinking RA, RB, RC, rural, the order of these.
Yeah, so
Okay,
do
right.
an X.
Okay, so tell me again where the X's are supposed to be,
The
because
X's
that
are
was one
supposed
of
to
my
be in
questions.
RA and RB.
And a P and R and RC.
Yes.
Yeah. There should be an X for RB.
All right, RC and rural P and X, RA and RB.
Yes. So
So Paul, my question is, we picked the Ps for lodging house based on what logic? We need shelters, and those are located in R and RC, and that's why we're allowing it there. And then,
and we're allowing lodging houses in the areas that would have our,
Already have student.
basically where there is currently either a lot of student housing.
Yeah.
It's not central business because it's not appropriate for central business. We'd want denser stuff in the central business. And also out where, in our outlying industrial zones. So in general, because this is also a place where employees
yeah,
would be living,
Could- yeah.
right? They're often used as, for anybody who's short-term labor, stuff like that, might be looking for a place like this.
So with the deletion that we're adding here for student rental,
Yeah.
what are we losing for, that is the only control we have for behaviors that are well documented in town that have been historically misaligned with families, neighborhoods. So what risk are we taking here with the lodging house that we lose the ability to help manage that behavior?
Well, they're not allowed.
They're not going to be allowed with in our
They're not
NRB
in-
at all.
There are X's in RA and RB.
There are X's in RA and there are X's in RB. Okay, good, yeah. That was the change we just made, just
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not gonna, the P under RB was a mistake, that should be
Okay,
it.
all right.
So all of our, yeah,
Have we opened the door to R and RC? I like the shelter argument. Have we opened the door to other houses that become problematic in those other areas that cannot currently become
Can't
a
have one
problem?
without the other there. In general, I don't believe. I mean, it's, I don't think we have,
Well, the control is on the one-family, two-family dwelling piece, right? That's what prevents a single-family home from becoming full of a lot more people than we want.
right. Well, by aligning with the lodging house, that we allow,
Because, Michael, you sent a definition of one-family, two-family dwelling. Can you explain how that applies?
Oh, well, Paul,
yeah, so that was, I wanted to, the purpose behind that is I wanted to make sure we weren't creating a gap. in-
Right, that's what I'm trying to talk about.
Okay? So per zoning, all right, our single family, two-family houses, those are fine. So what becomes interesting though is that lodging house is based on the building. Okay, it has to do with what is the structure doing. So so if you had a two-family, for instance, it's quite possible that a lot of those two families over on Code Drive, and this would be where we could potentially get pushback, might be reinterpreted as lodging houses.
I don't think we should have a P at Coe's Corner.
it's such a strange area.
Well, Coast Corner is
In Coast Corner,
bed and breakfast and
There's a
two
bed and breakfast there now.
single-family houses? So that's what Coast Corner is right now?
Is it bed and breakfast or lodging house?
They're not full-time residents,
yeah.
so they wouldn't be a lodging house.
We got all Young Drive as well.
Yeah, you got Young Drive.
Okay. I mean, those are two families.
Really, it ought to be rezoned, you know, I mean, it's, Young Drive should be RA,
Yes, it should.
you know? That has.
Along with
convert-
Bayview, yeah.
Yeah,
Or
and,
Yeah, Bayview.
Bayview.
yeah.
I mean, I honestly don't see why we even have Coast Corner. You're right. it should
We're
be-
on a roll
it
here
should be
tonight, we
rezoned
could
and just
really, you know,
pop
push the
down.
envelope.
Coast
its
Corner, you
neighbors.
could lose Coast Corner and then make room for CB1, CB2.
But what
Not
we
have
have
to
in front of
change.
us here is
No, that-
the lodging. And can I ask a question about
Too
what
complicated.
precipitated this, though? Because all I saw was, we got this group together in light of the proposed legislation, including a provision that would not allow for special zoning for college students.
Okay, I believe, let's see,
It's.
let me find, do you have a copy of
I
it
got
on you?
some paper copies
I have some
here.
paper copies sitting around here too, I believe. I also have a copy in my email.
Gotta find, it's a lot of,
So while we're waiting for that, what's the definition of a one or two-family dwelling?
Oh, it's a home, a building for a single family.
Right.
It's very
Something
difficult
to
to
say.
concentrate with such special audience.
Yeah, we may need to recess.
So, a building with a single dwelling unit situated on a separate lot with no other dwelling units or non-residential uses other than those that are accessory to the single-family use, such as an ADU. And a duplex is a building with two dwelling units that are part of the same building.
Right. Exactly what it says on the 10.
Right. And the difference between the second dwelling unit and an ADU is size.
Right, namely that in a
I
duplex,
think-
they are nearly equal, and an ADU is substantially smaller.
I
than
believe
the
our
main
ordinance
dwelling.
has a 750 square foot limit on the size.
850.
850, 800, something like that. That's another thing that the state's trying to play with, by the way.
Well, I think my parents would rather have 1,000, so yeah. I
Well,
can
the
see it.
state's trying to make it 900, but I think that one might actually still be alive. Did you got the ones, I think it was 170. No, not 170, it was,
It wasn't 170.
SB 82?
I don't need the specifics. and I
It
don't wanna
basically,
So
it's,
basically what they were doing is they were making, literally making students a protected class.
yeah.
That is what they were doing.
Your school, where your school standing as a protected class, along with, religion, sex, and all that stuff.
And you were
They were going right
discriminating if
into
you
the
only
list.
allowed 3 of them
We
in
were
your house.
discriminating against them if we had things.
And they were also going to restrict or forbid us from using blood relations as a means of.
Yeah, shall
allowing-
not mandate occupants of housing units be related by blood
I hear
or
a lot of
marriage.
words. They were, or they
They
are.
pass or not?
They are still working on it. It's not going to pass this year.
But they
It
are.
was really close, though. We thought it was going to. It got yanked off the unanimous consent agenda in the House. And the Senate version of it. It got through the Senate, and when it got to the House floor,
So-
it got yanked from the unanimous consent agenda.
So if we have this, how long would it take to pull out of our back pocket should the bill become live?
If we're happy with it as it is, it would take us 2.5, about 10 weeks,
Oh.
But it's not, it's.
right? Because we'd have to pull it out, schedule a public hearing, do the public hearing, send it to council, they'd have to have a public hearing. So there's at least 8 weeks there.
Then, because at one time, didn't years ago, we had boarding houses as a use and it was removed?
And we still have it.
We do.
It's still there.
All right.
It's
Oh,
just
yeah,
not
I see it
allowed
now.
anywhere.
It's just not allowed anywhere.
Oh, then we don't have it. Okay.
But I
don't.
think it's important to have it
sorry,
in
we have
here,
the
and I think it's an easy change. I mean, I'd rather do it now, and
It
it
allows.
does make more sense to call it lodging and take the
actually, I
student
think
word
this
out.
is, the other thing is this is easier to control from an enforcement perspective. I mean,
Because of the
everybody.
fire code.
Because of the
agreed
fire code.
with it, because of the fact that Audrey and and Brendan get to basically work together on this. It's like, oh, he says it's a lodging house, therefore you're not allowed to be here, or you're allowed to be here. It makes it really simple. Whereas the student rental thing was, the other aspect of it is UNH won't work with us on figuring out if people are students or not. We can't tell if they're young people who happen to be living there and working, or if they are students. And that's the other reason why Todd put the group back together again, is because we were finding the student rental one unenforceable.
Okay.
Just a quick, does the town administrator think this is an appropriate?
Yes.
Yes.
And then there was just one comment about the parking, and it was 1 space per resident. Is that anything that we would adjust now, or would we let that go as currently it's specified, or do we say it's 0.5 per resident or something?
You're talking,
Didn't this come up earlier that
it's one
state-
per
one
unit.
Oh, I thought it was
Oh,
one
no,
per.
well, for a lodging house, it's in this, it's actually listed in the site regs. It's
Okay.
one
Lot-
per
lodging.
resident.
It's one,
per
it's,
lodging.
yeah, I see that it says one per resident, and I was like,
You may
No,
wanna
no, it's one
reduce
per
that.
unit.
and then if while we're
And then there's something about.
discussing, I would say we reduce that, but,
0.75.
And then there's
yeah.
something
0.5,
about.
0.75, 0.
Which is actually strange because lodging house, oh, we would have site plan review for lodging houses, right?
Yeah, I think we confirmed that.
So you could, you'd have flexibility when they come in for review with parking. But you may want to, reduce it to 0.5 and you could adjust it further in site review. It's rooming or boarding houses, fraternities, sororities, or congregate housing, one per resident.
And that's mandated, that's where you would have to have that many parking spots allocated, one per resident.
Right, in the site regs, but
Right.
you can easily waive that.
Right.
Case by case.
Yeah, that's why we had the Lambda house that on Madbury Road came to us, because they're under the requirement right now.
They may
Right.
not need it. They may not need it.
They're still going to be under the requirement, but
Not everybody needs it.
Are we there yet, or do we need to
get there.
take 5 to think about
I'm
it?
good.
I
He
think we're
wants to
there.
take 5. We take, let's, well, why don't we
And
just
then we'll
vote
He
take
wants to
that?
take
All right.
5.
Let's, all right, so
Okay, we might have a public comment in the room.
is there anyone else who like, all right, I'll move that we initiate this proposal.
Well,
as-
you wanna put it out for a public hearing?
Yeah, let's put it out for public hearing.
Yeah, we haven't had a public hearing.
What's on our agenda next meeting?
You have a conceptual, I hope, for Technology Drive. They're adding a lot of warehouse units. It's conceptual. That's all that I know of now.
Yeah, plenty of time.
Okay. That's all we have?
So,
Let's put it on next, then let's do a public hearing.
And we pulled it off Coast Corner, right? Coast Corner is X.
Oh,
Why don't we wait to see what happens
I
at
don't know what we
the,
decided on Coast Corner.
let's see what happens at that public hearing.
Yeah, we'll just leave it there as it stands
Yeah,
now.
because it may be fine.
I mean, I do like your idea about doing a rezoning, but that's a,
That's a bigger
that's a
job,
different
Huge lift.
not today.
yeah.
So it's a P in Coast Corner right now.
We'll see what happens at the public hearing,
That is correct.
because we won't make any
Yes.
final decisions until after public hearing.
Right.
can you also make one minor change? Move rural after, in the table, after RC. It should be RA, RB, or CR.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
That's why I got confused with the
Okay.
P.
But, okay. No, I'm fine with the change. I just don't think it needs to be a motion to move
No,
that.
it's just a formatting thing, so.
Yeah, but we need to amend it
All
to do
right.
it, yeah.
So we're gonna,
Should go
we
after
got
RC.
a motion to initiate this thing and schedule a public hearing?
Well, not to initiate, just
just
schedule.
schedule a
public.
We don't need a motion to schedule a public hearing.
Great.
Okay,
So that's for June.
5-minute break?
Yeah.
5
We'll
minute
come
break.
back at 9 o'clock?
All right.
yeah.
Look, our guest over here.
Not sure what that scoring means, but we'll,
So we going on to conservation
we're going to
subdivision?
go on conservation subdivision. So my goal here, so the goal for tonight is to get a feel whether or not this is something that we're ready to pursue at this time, or whether it needs more significant rewrite.
The Concom?
No, not from Concom. This is the conservation subdivision rewrite
Oh, the rewrite, yeah.
that I,
The conservation
working on.
subdivision. oh my
Right,
gosh.
right,
Right.
which maybe Concom would have an opinion on this, but it's,
I was thinking, I heard
So-
conservation in my head, went
so,
like.
yeah, anyway. So, and because if we feel that this is just going to be, this isn't ready for us to really sink our teeth into, then I'll move it back behind conservation.
The only thing, the
I
only
like it.
reservation I have is it seems as though you two are not on the same
Absolutely.
page.
So let
That's
me,
why I
let me
think
give,
we need
let
to
me
have a
present
dialogue. I
it.
think we need to have a dialogue. I
Let me
like
present it, and that's why we're going to spend a half hour here talking about it.
All right.
I have notes.
And if we want to, we can bring this up again at the next meeting and start going into a little more deeper. So after we did the overlay district, the attainable housing overlay district, one of the big comments that I received from the town council was they wanted a home ownership option for more things that are more affordable to do. So this is my take on that, and that was really one of the primary goals behind me redrafting the conservation subdivisions. I have floated this past 3 council members and incorporated their inputs into it already. I used my experience on the Conservation Commission and the Agriculture Commission to help keep things in line with what they're doing. I helped draft the initial version of the conservation amendment as well, so I kind of know what was in there.
Yeah.
And I tried to keep the major elements of that in place. From the point of conservation, the whole idea of trying to maintain wildlife corridors and solid areas is you don't want your open space to be piecemeal. You want to try to maximize its continuity from piece to piece and within a realm. And that's one of the areas where Michael and I have a disagreement, because I see these buffers between a road and a development as a waste of open space, because it's poor quality open space when it comes to wildlife. And then my other idea was, and this is where it's like I went totally out of the box here and said, we're not going to talk about density. I'm going to say, well, let's figure out what part of the property we want the development on, and then let the developer be creative to try to make the best use of that property, because no matter what, it's all going to get cleared. Do you want to clear it for 8 units, or do you want to clear it for 18? And that goes against some of the traditions that are here in town, where it's like, well, I want to have only, in my rural zones, even under a conservation subdivision, I'm still putting everything on 2 acres. It was kind of
I hear you there.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and
we're trying to
even
achieve.
looking at what I've written now, I want to massage some of it, so
Yeah.
don't take anything
Yeah.
that I've put in here as I'm backing it 100%. There are a few key elements, though, that I'm very,
So understanding the premise here, it makes a little more sense now why you would spend your time on this. The idea of creating a home ownership model that's affordable. In our town, the only way to subdivide is conservation subdivision, really, right? I mean, that's it. That is the only recipe in town. And by removing the large acreage requirements, you could get a denser development that would reduce the overall cost. Because a building lot is what, couple $100,000, $250,000 in this town, right? And if it's only a building lot, whether it's a half acre or 2 acres doesn't make a difference if you can't get anything else on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and I used, you know, the model's idea of a lot of the housing types that we're permitting in the overlay district, I wanted to incorporate here as well, even though they would normally be considered out of place for that area.
All right.
Right? So I could build a cottage court or put a little, maybe have some townhouses type deal, if it, and then mixed in with potentially other things, right? So,
Buffers? We
Duplex.
got buffers accounted for? Because I
Well,
thought you may have nixed that.
I nixed some of the buffers,
Okay.
all right? And so, with regards to the buffers, so the question that I got from 2 of the council members is, why do residences need to be buffered from other residences?
Yeah.
Fair question.
Yeah.
Because if they currently don't look at other residences, I find if you look out your window and you see your neighbor's house, you've grown accustomed to that. But if you're out in R or RC and you don't see your neighbor's home, and someone buys a vacant lot and says, you know what, I'm gonna do a conservation subdivision and I'm gonna get 18, 20 little cookie cutter lots here for some townhomes, that might be a problem.
Well, that's just a problem to that particular person because they don't want to look at it, but is it really a problem? I mean, is it detrimental to the best interest? It's only affecting the person that's looking at it and they may not like it, but what if the other people have the right to do it? I mean, I had a house that was built next to me, suddenly.
Yeah.
And my purpose here is to start a discussion.
Okay. And it's worked.
So how much of a buffer is there though? Because there is some buffer, right?
Oh, it's going on.
I remember reading it somewhere in here.
Well, the buffers of the underlying zones still apply, right? But the conservation subdivision, the old conservation subdivisions had like a 200-foot buffer on one
Okay,
side.
that's what so did you like put it at 50 or, I'm trying, I didn't actually read the data on that. I remember one place it showed
Find the
buffer.
right section.
It's section L, perimeter buffer maybe?
Yeah, probably perimeter buffer.
Vegetated buffer strip shall be maintained along the external perimeter or property line of the conservation subdivision to minimize the impact on abutting properties.
Yeah, I mean, ostensibly, the reason for a buffer is that in a conservation subdivision, there's smaller lots and it's a dense development, whereas in the rural zone, a lot of the lots are on 2-3 acres or more. So if you think it's appropriate for big lots, rural type lots to be buffered from denser single family, plus as Richard said, it allows for some multifamily townhouses. And the other thing is, I mean, I know it does sound a little snobbish, like I've got a 3-acre lot, I want to be buffered from somebody with a 1-acre lot, it's kind of silly. But the typical way that conservation subdivisions are done is you'll have a 10 or 20-acre lot, and it's sort of, there's a road and it's all sort of internal. So everything's clustered and you've got open space all around it. But it doesn't have to be done that way.
Yeah, so the thing that I struck basically says, by the way, you're going to have to abide by the zone buffers, which you do anyway, right? And as well as the wetland overlay districts buffers, which you do anyway. I mean, nothing about this says you're allowed to violate them. It just says you have to do what the zone requires. So to me, I read it as redundant.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
It's a huge paragraph that is effectively redundant.
I'm done.
Just a question. So is this like a redo of the conservation subdivision language, or is this like a net new ability to create a different type of conservation
This is a
subdivision?
redo.
Redo.
I mean, you may as well think of this as, we're doing a zoning rewrite now. We're
Yeah.
underway, and I'm assuming this would be the next chapter.
This would be the next chapter, would be it. I'm proposing this as the next chapter if we think it's.
So it's not like that we would
I
have
mean, if
two
a-
types
if a
of
majority of you
conservation
think this is a
subdivision, the
really-
old
This would
and then a
replace
new,
So-
we would just have this.
Right. Yeah, so this would be a replacement of the existing chapter. And like, as I said, if a majority of you think that this is a bad direction to go, then we'll trash can it and move to another chapter that's ready to work on.
But
I
you
think
need
it's
to
a
do this at
must-have.
some point, whether now or
We,
later.
just
we
mean-
need to,
yeah,
I mean,
but-
that.
Part of the rewrite.
But
From
if we
part
don't,
of-
if the model isn't,
Acceptable.
it doesn't have the backing of enough of the board, then we gotta go back and build a new model. So,
I think
and that's
this
part
is-
of what I need to,
And it-
I'm hoping that we can figure out between this meeting and the next one.
This thing has been ripe for needing a rewrite
A long
for
time.
years. I read this first when I started on the housing task force, and it was
It's
awful.
ridiculous, yeah.
It's awful. And I think simplification is extremely important, and I think it helps us with being able to put more housing in logical designs built by people that know what they're doing, that don't need to have 50% of this in writing.
And from a housing perspective, it's nearly impossible to create denser housing, more attainably priced housing, as the council would like to see happen, and what one of the focuses of the Housing Task Force is to do it. How else can we do it other than tweaking our conservation subdivision, because it's
The only thing we got.
it's the only thing we have.
Right.
And there's a lot of opportunity in changing what we have. And what we have now is really economic discrimination.
Right. I mean, unless we want to upzone residence A, and I'm not sure how popular that's going to be.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of availability.
Okay. So,
I think part of the problem with this is there's so much here that you can't see the
digest.
point through all the words. So maybe we should just say.
so how about if I first focus on one of the biggest discrepancies between Michael, who's representing the traditional zoning professional, and my new model, which is outside the box.
The avant-garde.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is basically, I'm saying, based on the zone, and I pulled numbers, they're not quite out of my hat, but I'm not married to any of them. Based on the zone that you're in, a particular percentage of the property could be used as your developable area, where you're allowed to do carte blanche.
Develop it.
All right, the rest of it's going to be open space. It needs to be maintained as open space. In that open space has to be all of your wetlands and things like that, that we don't want to
wildlife
have touched.
corridors.
Now, there is a caveat. If the amount of wetlands on your property is greater than the amount of open space that you would normally be allowed, that trumps the open space. I mean, you can't, if you have a 10-acre lot, and you're in a zone that allows you to use half of that, but you have 6 acres of wetland, you can only work on with your 4 acres. You can, okay, and that's what that,
The wetlands, yeah, the
Which makes
wetland have
sense.
to be preserved, yeah.
okay? And then I say, you know what? There's a few, you have these types of buildings that you can use. Their goal here is to hit home ownership, residential things, and I think what I said is, you're allowed here it is at the top of page 5. All allowed residential use of the zone plus houses and up to 4 family houses are allowed under this model. So, and it potentially could work in any zone. That's one of the things, areas where we should look at, is maybe there are zones that it doesn't make sense in. I didn't put that much thought into that. But it could work in RA. We have some dead or distressed properties in RA. This could potentially be used to do an infill in RA.
In RB,
In a much more effective way than we're currently allowed, because right now you can't do a conservation subdivision in RA, I don't believe.
That spot on in Mebria Road, that empty lot, maybe.
Yeah,
So it's a net of.
yeah, so go ahead.
So the intent of what you're doing and the net effect is for the sort of physical characteristics or the amount of built space to, in the proportion of built space to open space to remain about what it is, but to have the character of the space change
Yes.
from single family to more dense models like duplexes and fourplexes and things like that.
Yeah, I'm envisioning condominium type ownership models.
More denser
Single homes is
residential.
included in that.
You could have
But you can do single homes. You could
still
you could do a bunch of single homes, but now instead of having to do a single home on an acre and a half, you can do them on a quarter acre.
You could have a mix
You know,
of those.
As long as
do
the
a cottage court.
footprint of the homes were proportionately reduced so that the proportion of open space to the housing footprint added all together in the aggregate did not result in less open space than under current zoning. More or less, or is it a little bit
Well, it would
different?
make-
There's
it
some
would create-
movement. Some movement. There's some.
The numbers here generally actually work out so that we have more open space. We're getting more open space than we currently would be getting.
Like creating denser living space.
And that open space would be constructed in a way that, from a conservation model, makes more sense. Now, by doing that, I am saying, hey, you know, that might mean not having 200 feet between every driveway on Packers Falls Road.
You would create a denser development where homes
Yeah,
could
so
be
I am,
very
you know,
close together.
the drawbacks are, you know, some of the aesthetics, we give up a little bit on some of the aesthetics, potentially.
And
But not really, it's just a different type of aesthetic.
It's a different, well,
And there are.
depends on who you're talking to.
There are developments
Well, it
all over
always
the
is,
place.
then.
The argument will be that I'm giving up on aesthetics, though.
But the point is it's all about, the guy that's the developer knows what he's gonna be able to sell.
Yeah.
And this stuff sells.
What do you do with the dimensional table? And I'm thinking setbacks.
The underlying zone applies.
So 50-foot rear setbacks, I gotta go on the other page now, don't I? 50-foot rear, 50-foot side.
So let me clarify that. The underlying, with regards to buildings within the development, we're flexible. With regards to those and anything outside of the property, the underlying zone applies.
And where's the flexibility written in? It's not yet. Am I correct in saying that we haven't tackled that not yet?
Oh, the flexibility is.
No. Where do we say, hey, you know, we're flexible when it comes to the
And-
setbacks here?
And D. Oh, in the setbacks. That is
It's
in.
in-
That's in I and J.
I and J?
So Paul, your F paragraph on page 5, doesn't that tell the whole story? You've got, you're saying individual lots created as part of the subdivision may be smaller than the required size.
Yes.
And you can go down to 10,000 square feet. So that's a quarter acre. So what you're saying is cluster everybody in the middle, put them on quarter acre minimum, and then you could have a big lot. If you had 10 acres, you could put,
So if you had 10 acres and say RC, you'd be able to use 2.5 acres. You'd have 2.5 acres to cut into quarter acre lots with a little bit of road. You'll get 8 or 9
10
lots.
houses, yeah.
So you can, you're driving out one of these more rural roads within the town. Okay.
You go down a road.
And you come to a driveway. You drive in and you drive in a little ways through the woods and there's a circular drive and then there's quite dense townhomes arranged around the circular drive or something like that.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of common open space.
With common open spaces. So and now there's differentiation.
It's not common though, because you cross that out left and right in between.
Open
So,
space.
the quote, common open, so any yard park area that's in between, that's not part of the open space. Open space is areas you didn't clear,
Didn't clear.
okay? That yard, if you want to take it half an acre and create a little park for everybody to share as a front yard or play area type thing, that's fine, but it comes out of your developable
Yeah, that's
area.
not, yeah.
So you can create a higher quality developable area by including a park, but it's costing you a house or two, a unit or two.
How does this harmonize with the master plan?
It doesn't. The master plan says rural areas stay on giant lots, period.
Does it?
Oh, no, it accommodates
Say like that?
conservation subdivisions.
This is just.
Yeah, but besides this, though, it doesn't say it fights sprawl. And so it says, and I'm not saying this is sprawl, I'm saying this is a good way to do concentrated building that's
That
not
avoids sprawl.
that avoids sprawl, and the neighbors all have big lots. So everybody, you've thrown out the Packers Falls, everybody's on 3 acres, right, ish. So now what you're doing is taking spruce wood and putting another spruce wood in somewhere, dropping those selectively around town as we see. And I think that is a pretty good look. And it's a cohesive neighborhood. What you're doing is dropping a new street with dense housing, and then your big buffers lie around.
On the
You've got
outside.
10 acres, 2.5 has got stuff on it, the rest is swamps and bees and trees, and we're accomplishing the same objective here.
That's what the current ordinance does that. The problem with the current ordinance is the allowed density is way too low, and the process is way too complicated and prescriptive. So the current ordinance accomplishes a lot. It accomplishes flexibility. Well, in my view, and it's tailored for the lot, the character of the lot. Do you have wetlands? Do you have steep slopes? Are you shallow to bedrock? But it's too complicated and it doesn't allow enough density.
So where are the pieces that you disagree with Paul? Because there's a lot of green.
What Michael would like us to do is just play with the density. So right now.
And other things, simplify.
So to take our 10 acre model out in rural zone, right, where it's currently 3.5, a current conservation, so normally that would allow 3 units, a conservation subdivision would get you a 4th. And I'm saying, whereas I said, no, let's get 20.
Because there is a need for that.
I don't disagree with that.
So
Oh, I think-
to move the density down to be the same level, I don't think you can't use a percentage model. You have to, and that's when I looked
Yeah.
at saying, hey, we're going to give you a % bonus to your density by doing a conservation subdivision. It doesn't work. I mean,
Because they run into.
because if you have huge lot sizes, unless you're offering a 1,000% density bonus, it doesn't make sense.
I get it. Yeah.
You actually have to go and play with your lot sizes.
I think Manish, you wanted to say something?
I mean, just hearing the conversation, it seems like it's very much like Fitz Farm. I don't know if you're familiar with Fitz Farm. Like the homes are not on very big lots. The homes are on, and it's a 55-plus community. So the homes are on nice, small lots. Then you have the wetlands at the back, and then you have all the open space, which is open space, I mean, it's concentrated, so.
And Fitz Farm, I think, is really, people appreciate that project. It seems like it's very well done.
Yeah, the project's
Yeah.
very well done. It's always in demand. You can never get a place there. It's, a lot of people like me love it. I don't live there, but I don't know.
It is a nice road over there.
People, there's a list when the houses
Yeah.
go on the market, Fitz Farm, people just,
And that's, so nobody's arguing against your notion. How do we move this?
I think we should go
I don't
page by
think,
page
right?
next time with it. 'cause
I think we
do
should
have
look
notes
at-
in
yeah.
this
ask-
section.
Can I just two thoughts or comments? So I agree with just about everything there, and I think it makes an awful lot of sense. And as I drive through other towns, as we're yard sailing, I'm like, I'll think to myself, boy, this is a conservation subdivision, and they just destroyed this massive space with just internal sprawl in this conservation subdivision. And I'll say to myself, wow, that's
It's a missed
not the great
opportunity.
use of space that
Missed
you had here,
opportunities.
just a huge, so I agree with a lot of that. I do wonder if, and I think the consensus is not do this way, but if you sort of had your classic conservation subdivision, because I think it's an RSA, the conservation subdivision comes down from the state, I think.
I think it simply says
It's
you can do it.
It's
It
a,
doesn't prescribe anything.
it just says you can do it, and then so I guess I would have a question: is there a conservation subdivision standard where we sort of go around the edges here, and then is there a conservation subdivision type 2 that is more prescriptive with a lot of density, where there may be certain areas and certain bands where that conservation subdivision type 2 makes an awful lot of sense, and I would probably tend to think it's closer in the rural areas, closer to downtown. And then there's a classic subdivision that's sort of farther out, which, unfortunately, I live in one of those conservation subdivisions where people have 1.5, 2 acres, and,
It's a really nice neighborhood, but it's
But
big.
I just am sort of wondering if you sort of keep one sort of original sort of in place, and then you have a net new one that you can kind of like band around where it might make sense in certain areas. And then that one, you can kind of do exactly what you're describing, you kind of keep the other one in place. It's just a
It just
possibility.
seemed like, to me, like in the rural, the clusters would be more effective because you'd be able to keep more rural space rural. And instead of
utilize
having, individuals with 3-acre lots, 2-acre lots, even 1-acre lots, you'd have them clustered, and you could actually have rural developments that then take less rural land away. So if somebody has those huge farms out there, they could take out, I just want to take,
they could take out an acre.
maybe just take out, 5 acres and create a little cluster.
and then
Right
take the
now,
other-
they'd be able to get,
wouldn't-
they have
it
to
wouldn't be
have
worth
3
it.
acres to put in a house, so you could put in, 3 houses on that if you were lucky. Whereas now you'd be able to cluster it, and you wouldn't be wasting.
And what if
You'd
they,
lose less space for build.
I would just say, this looks a lot like some condominiums I've seen. Weird condominiums. But their condominiums can be used both commercially and residentially. And so it's as though you would allow a condominium and all the open space would be a common element. And the costs of maintaining it would be, and so forth, would be shared by the holders of the condominium units. And maybe unlike a traditional, what we think of as a condominium, where there's a building, and the building is essentially owned by the condominium, and only the cubes of space are owned by the unit holders. There are condominiums where it's just the streets and the infrastructure and so forth, and the open space that are the common elements, and the structure itself is part of the unit. It sort of makes me think of that as a potential, as sort of what this is like. I wonder, Paul, did you see analogous structures in the literature and so forth that you modeled this after? And, just the kind of the urban planning literature, is this entirely original?
My head.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Oh, gosh. Motion to adjourn.
I mean, not that means that, I don't want to delegitimize what's original, but it makes me, this is scarcely the only.
I'm sure.
Community, we're scared, we can't be the only community that's.
There is a God, just like there's a godfather for a lot of things. There's a godfather for pocket neighborhoods. There's a godfather for missing middle. And there's a godfather for conservation subdivisions. His name is Randall Arendt. If you really want to learn about it, Google him, Arendt. He's written a number of books. He's brilliant. You'll learn a lot if you check out his stuff.
But, the thought that came to me just the other day was what I really almost built here is kind of like a PUD for a residential area.
That's, I was thinking the whole time, this is a PUD, this is a PUD.
Right.
Basically it's as though, but with a PUD, you can.
Except it's a conservation subdivision based on a PUD type concept, because you're not going to rezone the property, the land or anything like that.
States where they
You'd
do
have to kind of
residential
depart
PUDs.
from the concept of mixed use, and broaden the concept to say, you would, but it is
Residential uses.
essentially a PUD because you're varying the zoning laws based on,
Yeah.
But, I mean-
Designed to concept.
and it would justify review on a property by property basis because there'd be enough going on within each individual parcel to evaluate it in the same way that you would evaluate a proposed PUD plan.
Okay, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the questions that Gary actually asked is really critical, is this founded in our master plan? Because if it isn't, then we can't be doing it. So I was looking through that now. Did you do that?
My familiarity with a lot of the recommendations is there are a lot of things in the master plan that this is supporting.
Oh, the master plan will say one thing here and quite
Right,
the opposite
exactly.
there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So
That's the problem with the master.
I think you're on good ground. The only one that I found that bothered me was the goal is to provide an adequate supply of affordable housing in Durham. That's a good fit, clearly. The goal is a good fit here. Under planning policies, though, it says apply smart growth principles when citing future affordable housing developments within the community by increasing density in the downtown area while restricting development in the peripheral areas of the town. So clearly, it's a wah, wah, wah. We're not hitting it there. But just two further down, consider the simplification of the conservation subdivision ordinance to streamline the approval process. So ding, ding, ding.
Which
So
chapter is
Yeah.
this?
this
That's
is
the housing chapter.
the housing and demographics chapter. So I think, Gary, to answer your question, I think we're okay to fiddle around with this.
And if you go to the conservation and natural resources section, you'll get a couple more check marks.
Yeah.
And as we attempt to bring the master plan up to its next decade, there may be complete different opinions on where you're building.
Well, I think Paul's impulse in, thinking outside the box here, and how do you do these two things? You both play with the conservation subdivision so that we don't just have so few people living in these rural areas on such big lots and single-family homes, but to do it without adversely affecting the rural character of the areas outside downtown in a way that really would be inconsistent with the master plan, because the master plan really, I think, speaks to kind of maintaining the rural character, and that, so I think his impulse is to say, let's not just chop this up into quarter-acre lots. Let's keep the open space and regulate the open space and concentrate, and then the trade-off is put much more dense development like townhomes, duplexes, people accepting lower cost housing with lower square footages, sort of like was referred to in that, in that RK, is it RKG, is that the end?
Yeah.
In that study.
Right.
And then I think it's really intriguing. The only question is that what the market wants?
Well, the market does want smaller footprint homes. You can see some right now. Go to this corner of Sophie and Banner in Dover. There's a great example of smaller homes on very small, I've been in one, a friend of mine, she lives in one, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We are running
Anyway,
over right now.
Can I
But
offer
you can
one
go
more
there and
thing?
see that.
Because
Yeah.
I was on this committee when the conservation subdivision was created. And that was my first term, or my first round. And, you know, we were heavily criticized for creating this subdivision ordinance and maintaining those huge minimum lot sizes. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we heard from the engineering professionals and the developers there. Why are you doing this and still requiring, you know, these huge minimum lot sizes?
Well, the thing is, one of the major flaws is not that it does not require large lot sizes. It keeps the same density as for large lot sizes.
But that
You get
creates-
to cluster and have quarter-acre lots under the current ordinance, but you can't have any more of those than if they were 3.5 acres.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
That's the
exactly.
point.
That- I said that incorrectly. Thank you for correcting me.
But that is, it's cost prohibitive, and so it really comes down, having these large lots to say, oh, well, you know, somebody could still, we're keeping the density down, we're keeping our rural character by having these large lots, but what we're creating is economic discrimination.
All right, so the consensus is to bring this to the next meeting, we'll continue.
It needs some work, yeah.
All right. So next meeting, we can, as Heather suggested, we can start doing the page-by-page
Yep.
thing. All right. Item 10, review of prior year and priorities for upcoming years.
You want to do that on June 11th?
Let's
'Cause
do
we
that
don't have
another
as much
time,
on
'cause
June.
we
Very
need to
good.
move to other
And now,
business.
other business, Rob, you want to talk about
Yeah, so.
Dover Road?
In my view, when we're approving projects, we're approving drawings, and the engineered drawings are what we look at, and we say, this is what the project will look like. And then
Site plan approval.
Site
right?
plan approval,
yeah.
right. And so that's what we, and then hand to Audrey and code, and they enforce that. So want to clarify what we approved for Duncan's, and because it's, what I thought we approved is different than what we have in our approval letter, and I think we need to reconcile those two things. So on the original site plan, it's got on the primary entrance,
Well, they brought a new site plan to the meeting and distributed that.
and that site plan had no left turn signs on it. If anybody's got a copy of that,
Can you give me just a few minutes and I'll go
yeah,
grab
if you can
that?
go get it, that'd be
Be right
great.
back.
It was at the last meeting, right?
Because it's not on the website either.
That's the
Oh, it's
confusing
not?
thing.
Because it was brought,
2 weeks ago.
yeah.
It was
And
brought
it's
in.
not on the website.
So I'll
And it's
speak,
been approved.
Okay.
See where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
yeah.
Yeah, there is no new.
The first time that I envisioned
The same place.
the removable curb, right? And the removable curb had two sort of curved flanges, and the one on the right, coming from the main entrance, directed the traffic so that it could only make a right turn. And that, of course, stuck in my mind. And then the next thing that the only moment that in my consciousness that I saw the change that cut that flange off so that a left turn would be permitted was in the email today I got from Michael. That's the first time that reached my consciousness.
But it wasn't a true splitter island. I'm looking at the photo now because exiting the place, it was just a tangent. It wasn't curved. So it would allow you to make a left-hand turn coming out of the primary drive.
On
What are you looking at when we're,
Is this the one he sent today?
Yeah, he
The
sent
little
it in an
snippet?
email at 5:20.
yeah, that's the first time I saw that.
So it shows the splitter island.
Oh,
And yeah, you'll see that. And it's what the DOT approved too, allowing left turns out of the primary drive,
Well-
but no left turns in.
Right, I'm not, for me, I'm saying, I'm not, I want to get to the bottom of it, of what happened, so that I'm,
Yeah, so
can do
this
my
is-
job competently, and I don't miss things in the meeting that happened.
Yeah, this is the first time.
But it's a separate issue for me, whether I feel comfortable substituting my judgment for the final negotiated position of the New Hampshire DOT.
But the New Hampshire DOT was always concerned about the queue on the,
Yeah, they dealt with that, that's fine, that's all resolved.
New Hampshire DOT was concerned about the sight lines from the stop light. If you're heading northbound, you can't see through the cars that are waiting at the red light, so you can't see if you're trying to do your left. They have always been concerned about the sight line. That's what they said in their original.
they
So-
appear to have allowed it, that they've got over.
But the only evidence
I
that
don't
they
see a
allowed it was
document. That's not
this,
the
what I'm
document
saying
we
this
approved.
afternoon, but that didn't make it into my consciousness until this afternoon. And I asked a question, I think directly at the meeting, you're living with New Hampshire DOT requirement restricting the turns. I think that there was that.
And they
question,
said- and they
no
said
one
yes.
said, oh yeah, well, we negotiated
I
with the
wasn't
New
at the
Hampshire
meeting. I just
DOT and there was a
listened to
change.
it on,
Or am I wrong?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we
That's-
have
and
all
it's stuck
along
in
been
my head,
operating
that's
under the
what-
assumption
Yeah.
that left turns out.
And the
are
splitter
not allowed.
island was a true splitter island. It was removable.
Right, that,
Well,
I
like drive
mean,
overable.
It directed traffic to a right turn only and restricted the left turn.
But I'm looking at the,
But you're looking at
the
what
plan and
this
I'm saying,
afternoon.
no,
You're not
that's not the
looking-
case.
Okay, but
That
if
is
you
what
wanna
we
see the
saw
site plan
2
on-
weeks
on-
ago.
The site plan on March 14th has a legend that says no left turn on the sign too.
So
You see that?
What are you looking at?
At Michael's email at 5:23.
That's undisputed.
He's got a snippet of the
We're
driveway.
not disputing that.
And it includes a raised concrete median that would inhibit left turns in. Could you make a left turn in? Sure. But the island is set up to inhibit that. It is not designed to inhibit a left
That's
turn
from
out.
5 this afternoon. What
And-
we're saying is that when we approved it, that had not been before us.
And the drawing
And
that,
the drawings that we had
Had
showed a
stopped.
true splitter island and a no left turn sign,
No left turns in or out.
or out.
had two
That was my understanding.
Either.
R2 signs at that entrance that said, two of them at that entrance that say, an R3-2 says, no left turn. They had it out there. And then this appears
This is
after the
different.
fact.
Ooh.
this
Yeah,
is
this is-
different,
Not,
yes.
it's
This
not
is what we
the way
had
we should
at
be
the meeting.
operating.
That is what, just a snippet.
I mean, maybe I just wasn't
This is
diligent
from-
enough to grill them more diligently.
Is that the plan they handed out?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I've got, this is the plan they handed out.
that's what we had that
Yeah,
night.
Sally has the same copy.
Let me see.
Can you hand it around?
This is what we had that
And
night,
it's the
yeah.
copy that I took
And
and
it's-
brought upstairs and put on Michael's desk.
It's the snippet.
Yeah, it shows,
These
you
are
know,
the,
left,
this is the
left
copy
out,
that they
but no
brought and
left
handed
in.
out to us at the last meeting.
This is from the last meeting.
This is from the last meeting.
Yeah, I have
And
it.
Could I just take a quick look
Yeah.
at one of them, please?
Here. Now, this is what Michael sent this afternoon too.
Yeah, that's exact, it's the
Right,
snippet.
because
So
he
the-
got it
Right,
from,
because it doesn't show that.
Right, so the exit for the main access, all it says is, the only sign there is a stop
Right.
sign. And then for the access on the Holiday Inn property, it has do not enter, which is kind of interesting because they're right, it's an entrance lane.
Right.
But they've got that sign there. And then at the exit for the Holiday Inn property, they have a no left turn there. And I was hoping
Which is
Holiday.
what DOT
You guys understand, you accept that this changed. Between this meeting, between the meeting of the approval, this changed, right?
I don't
No.
think so, because
That
That
is what
was
they
what
gave
we-
us, that's what we approved,
Yeah,
right?
that's
I just
what we
pulled
had.
this out of my folder.
At the
I
last
just pulled this out of my folder.
Before the last meeting,
Right.
it changed between.
Oh, well, DOT changed.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So
That's why they
Okay,
handed
all
out the new
So
copies.
Sally, when you voted for this, did you think there was a left turn?
I did not
nor did
think
Gary.
there was a left turn out.
Right.
And
But if it's DOT that made that change,
But it was that we were going to see what we would,
I'm just not
Was as
happy
per
with the
DOT.
communication. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I don't really feel
'Cause
like.
in the DOT's
I feel like it wasn't.
So three of you over there
well, it's
voted
self-evident that
for
it was
approval, thinking there was going to be no left turn out of the
Right.
primary drive.
right.
That was my understanding at the time.
And
Mine
a fourth,
too, and
huh.
I wasn't at the meeting, but I listened to it on DCAT a week later. And my impression from watching the entire DCAT was that it was no left hand coming out.
Oh, but Heather, I watched DCAT also. I was watching for that.
It doesn't-
That wasn't really even addressed. They made a reference to DOT and,
Yeah, because it was
What-
under
let
the
me do-
DOT.
what about their first,
They
of
go
course,
with
the
left
first,
hand.
in the first DOT memo,
My-
was
oh, there
very
was,
clear.
right, nothing.
But they
No
weren't
lefts.
done yet, the first
And
one.
DOT changed.
Yeah, they did, because I
Well, you have the
willing to
memo.
permit.
I don't know, Paul gave me this memo. I don't know whether they passed this out. But they
We
must
passed-
have, because you gave this to me right after the meeting. And
It's
this
like-
says DOT.
We had that memo at the meeting?
That memo was passed, there might have only, there was only the one copy. And
I
I,
don't recall seeing that. This is May 1st.
that they did not make extra copies for.
We should have had.
I mean, it
We
sounds like it
approve-
wasn't,
Here's
watched
my
it. It
position.
sounds like it wasn't super clear.
Here's
I
my
will say that from
position. We
watching
approve
DCAT.
drawings. We review drawings. We're given time to review drawings ahead of time. I vigorously reviewed those drawings, and if this latest change came in at the meeting and I was too dim to pick it up, then shame on Rob for failing to review the drawing properly. There's 4 members of the board who viewed it the same way. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
And
I can see
I
that. I
don't
mean,
see how that can
my-
be accepted.
My
And
position, and my question to them was, all right, does the plan they presented meet all the requirements that DOT requested? And the answer was yes, which it does,
Yeah,
not
right?
stamped either.
And that was,
Well, they stamped their final plans afterward.
it was,
Right,
because this is
right,
what we
and-
had for the meeting.
And that's what I was voting on.
So did DOT change their mind subsequent
did.
to the meeting when
DOT
we
did
approved?
prior
Yeah.
to May 14th.
No, this is,
that's
this is May
And
1st.
I was
Okay.
curious about
Right
this
out
issue, and I
and left
asked the
out.
applicant, but maybe my question wasn't phrased artfully enough, and I assumed something about that they were understanding the tenor of my question. But the tenor of my question, and you listened to the
I
recording.
watched the recording.
So you remember the question I asked was, the tenor of my question, I thought, or I think now, but I could be wrong, was, so you got comfortable with the DOT requirement that was in place? And they didn't say, yeah, but we got comfortable with it as we negotiated a change to it. They just said, yeah, we got comfortable to it. So maybe it was on me then to say, well, but what I meant by the DOT requirement was the only DOT requirement I knew about. Right? So, I mean, now, so there's a,
It feels like
it feels like
Fast
it feels
one,
like
I'll pull here.
I wish I had, you know, it feels like probably there's
Well,
Part of this is on me, is what it feels like, that probably I wasn't quite astute enough to understand what was going on. But I will say that
I have no problem with the left turn out of there.
that's what I'm getting to. I'm getting to what I think now is, if the DOT had always said, no problem with a left turn out of there. I mean, my initial problem was exactly what the big problem of the stacking and the left turn lane onto New Market Road. That was adequately addressed. And when I look at that left turn, even though I'm somewhat disappointed in perhaps myself in the communication process around the approval, would I be for this if I'd never seen the DOT object to the left turn out? I think I would have deferred to the New Hampshire DOT. I think I would have said, look, this is what they do. They're professional engineers.
Can I
They
see
have
that
the
email?
data. As a planning
the
board
email?
member, I shouldn't be substituting my judgment for theirs. I think that's where I would have come out, and I would have said, I'm okay with the left turn out if they are. I think that's what I would have said.
We basically don't have a choice in that respect. We would have had to require
You would have had to
a
hire.
third-party study.
That's where I'm coming from. It's not
to
appropriate for
debunk-
me as a
Yeah,
planning
you
board
would
member
have-
to
You would have
imagine
needed,
that I know better
you had
than
that
them.
option. I mean, you could have, if you said, we don't like this idea of a left turn out at your main entrance, that's okay, but you would have had to hire a third-party traffic engineer to make a review.
Sure.
Which they would pay for. You could have done that.
Would the
Right.
left turn out now
I
be?
think that this is in the nature of bad communication, and probably I could have done a better job as a planning board member, but it would be highly inappropriate for me to have substituted my view for that of the New Hampshire DOT when they're subject matter experts and they got comfortable with it. That's where I come out.
Okay,
Does that make sense to you, Richard? You're kind of.
No, I was absent too. I was rather surprised that it got approved.
The,
I would not have
well-
the
approved it
planner's
if I had caught the
recommendation,
change.
so on the night of town planner's recommendation, please note the following. NHDOT review, the last we heard, NHDOT was opposed to allowing any left turns into or out of the site. The applicant has been discussing the project with NHDOT and should be able to provide an update to the board. That's what we had in our planner's review that night. That's why my brain was thinking NHDOT was saying no.
They were providing an update. I'm not sure how well it was
Yeah.
communicated, though.
yeah, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
No.
Four of the board members misunderstood the communication. It was communicated poorly, and I think as a practice, if that happens, we're setting ourselves up for being a dysfunctional board. That's my opinion.
not good.
And you got four of them, four voted yes on the wrong information.
So the process improvement would be, you also don't want late breaking, the night of, there's new information that's different
It
significantly
would have been
from what.
okay
you-
if it had been clearly communicated.
But he's right, though, we've had that before where you get plans that day, and maybe you don't approve. Maybe you have to give yourself that time. Is that what we're saying? That,
Well, I don't think that anything I had was,
like I said, I was.
except maybe this,
Well, and they
except maybe
didn't,
this.
excuse me, they didn't
I don't
elaborate.
think it's enough to put this map
Yeah.
in front of me. I don't think it's enough.
Right.
to-
There was
And we
no
can-
elaboration about what transpired with the DOT. Because maybe they did a gap analysis and the DOT said, yeah, for most hours of the day, that left turn can be accommodated. There was nothing that was
Right.
discussed there.
And we
Just
did-
all of a sudden,
No.
And we don't have that memo. We have, none of that is in the,
Right, no, I mean.
The specific comment the applicant made about this,
the turn thing then.
about this
driveway?
driveway was, oh, we don't know if this is exactly laid out, we're gonna, adjust this.
Right.
I'm gonna go back and look and make sure I have that accurate, but I'm almost positive he said.
But
"We're
that had
gonna
to do with
still play
pedestrian.
that entrance.
That had more to do with
It
pedestrians
had to
going
do
through
with
there.
how do the pedestrians walk across, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, well, yeah.
So in that case, you're looking at a incomplete drawing as well.
Well, you may, if some of you are not happy with it, you may get another bite of the apple, because this was approved, this plan shows on the Holiday Inn property, do not enter, and it shows no left turn. So if the Holiday Inn goes along with that, then they're good. If the Holiday Inn says, wait a minute, we're not going to accept that, then they're going to have to come back to you. So I have no idea
Well, there were
how that's going to
conditions.
play out.
Weren't there? I mean.
No, yes, no, if they, and what I sort of gathered from watching the tape is that they weren't real sure about the Holiday Inn.
Yeah, I
So if the Holiday
They
Inn
were still
says,
in.
we're not going to let you put a do not enter and a no left turn, then your approval, they have to come back to you, if that's the case. I have no idea how that will play out.
Well, your precedent conditions was access easement, clarify the nature of the access easement with the adjacent hotel property, submit revised easement documentation if appropriate. And the NDOT driveway permit, any significant changes to the plans as approved by the planning board shall be made to the planning board for review in the event of such review. See, that the memo bothers me because it's dated the 1st of May, and we don't have it. This is the first time I've seen it.
Well, I think I never saw it till after that meeting, and I wasn't.
And the meeting was on the 14th.
14th, yeah.
Right.
But we never saw that.
Yeah, I don't think they didn't send it. They must have handed it out. I think they handed it out to Paul at the meeting. Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they handed out the new drawings at the meeting.
Process-wise, though, it's difficult for us when we don't have the information digitally for us to consume prior to it.
Yeah.
And it's also difficult for the public when they don't have the information to consume prior to it. So you almost want a cutoff date where if you say, if you can't get it to us by this date, it's very difficult for us to act on this, and we can't have late breaking,
you
in
always have
software,
that option.
this happens all the time, and someone says, I just want this small change, it's just a small thing, and we want to put it in, and we say, we have a cutoff, you missed the window, it's going to roll to the next thing. And this, because this, as dated, updated on the 14th, I don't see that digitally.
None of there's no
And I don't
updating.
see that digitally, so in
Oh,
process.
we have it. It's going to be on the web. If it's not on there now,
Yeah, but-
It's not on there now.
It's
Well,
not
then
on there
it's
now,
after Tracy's going to upload it. I mean,
and it
it's gonna
wasn't
be-
on there on the night of the application.
Well, because that's when they handed it out, on May 14th. Peyton, that's already the board's policy, that whenever an applicant submits anything at any point, even if you have it in your packet, if you don't have enough time to review it and feel comfortable, always continue the review. Even if it's submitted in your packet.
Well, I was never
if it's
aware
too
that
complex,
there was something
you
I
can
needed to review.
continue.
Well, that was the issue, because I asked if everybody was comfortable voting on it, and we were,
Well, that
but
was because I didn't know that there was something outstanding that I didn't know about.
That's because we knew DOT said no. No
Because
left
it's
turn.
the applicant,
Yeah.
as opposed
That was
to
the
any
last-
left turns.
I mean, that
It
was
said
Left
right.
turn, okay, great, I'm there.
Right, and from my perspective, I think I probably still would have voted for it if I had known that they were going to allow the left turn out. I am,
Yeah.
at least 3 other people on the planning board were under the impression that the DOT was not going to allow the left turn out.
And
Yeah.
what happens if, because, hey, it's been approved now, it's probably moving forward, Michael.
But I do
Discusses
think
or
if
what.
you have concerns, there's a decent chance that the Holiday Inn's not going to go
How
for
about
that, for
this?
what
How
that's
about this
worth.
in the interim?
I think they'll
How
agree.
about, the collective we, the town of Durham and District 6 has got a good relationship. So why don't we reach out to the individual who's on this memo and say, what was it about their application? What was it that they presented to you that changed your mind to permit that left turn out? Because without knowing, Gary, I'm not gonna buy it blind, all right? I'm not gonna just say, hey, DOT permitted it, I'm good with it. But if the DOT says, well, we permitted it because of this, this, and this was what played into our decision, then hey, maybe we're all, maybe you would have been fine with that.
Yeah, if DOT said it's okay and here's good
And here's why.
Here's good logic. I don't have better data.
And, yeah,
Well, I can, this is what Roger Appleton, the Assistant District 6 Engineer, said in this memo. He sent this to James and Scott Mitchell on May 1st, but you didn't, it wasn't,
We never
never
saw it
shared with
until-
us. So it's, his memo, I'd send you all a copy of this tomorrow, but he says, I've gone to this.
You sent it to us this afternoon
okay.
at 5:23.
Yeah, so he said, I've gone to the site on multiple occasions at different periods to observe the operations and queues that occur here. Based on these visits and observations, along with the traffic impact study analysis, the below comments provide the configurations I'm willing to permit and also document remaining safety concerns that need to be addressed. I'm willing to permit right out and left out of the main driveway, blah, blah, blah. I asked for the traversable island, provide a plan to mitigate access, which is the parking for employees, I assume. But I won't allow the lefts at the Holiday Inn site.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a no-brainer. That's be a disaster.
All right.
But I'm happy to reach out to him if you'd like more
Well,
information.
maybe it's not. Maybe you just point it out. It's based on observations.
time of day, it can be
Many
fine.
times, or
I mean-
several
Yeah.
times, so you said it.
Circle K, you can go in and out. It's-
I'm just looking at it, I've walked by that site and thought about it a lot, and there is a lot more line of sight from that main driveway than there is from the Holiday Inn, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's any consolation, your option, you could have continued it, but in order to, but you would have had to hire a traffic engineer if you wanted to differ.
At the expense of the applicant.
Yeah, well, you could have done that.
On a slightly related note, we got the one letter from Mr. Ickes on Bayview Road, where he was suggesting converting this intersection to a circle, a roundabout. I did bring that to Todd, and he brought it to Stratford Regional, and it's going to be, they will take a look at potentially going forward.
I think the grades are prohibited. And I think the right-of-way would extend into that hotel parking lot.
It's tough.
That would be
It would,
big.
tough.
I have some similar concerns. It would be,
And you have,
with the proximity of the courthouse building to that corner and all, it does make doing a circle very, very tight.
The setbacks aren't enough
I
from
mean,
the buildings on the north side of,
There are, I mean, that's why they have to do the analysis of would it fit? Would you be able to get a large truck coming off out of Newmarket going into the downtown or not? Making that three quarters of the
Or,
ground.
it's the truck coming from Newmarket going to Dover. Those stop bars are staggered for a reason.
Yeah.
And if you have a circle, you're gonna need a big splitter island to allow that truck to make that maneuver, or have 2 lanes in your roundabout. And either way, you're sucking up a boatload of that hotel parking lot. I think you're not gonna get it.
If the left turn
not
is
gonna
going to
happen.
be there coming
I just
out,
can't envision it.
is
It's
it
too tight.
possible to change the traffic signaling to sort of regulate any left turn, the traffic signaling?
That intersection has 2 problems. First is the right on red as you're
Yeah.
coming out of Newmarket. That's just a nightmare with the sight lines that are there. And then the second one, like I said, is the amount of traffic that backs up at peak times for that left turn to Newmarket.
Every afternoon, it's gonna back up beyond Bayview, right?
Yeah.
And if you're trying to get out of Dunkin' Donuts at that time,
you're not gonna
you're
make a left.
not.
you're not,
Because
you're gonna be waiting.
You're gonna
you
go
need a
right.
prayer answered to make a left out of Irving,
Yep.
right?
Oh,
In order to
Yeah.
make that happen.
Yeah.
And now, they're almost right across from one
Yeah.
another.
They are right across from one
Right?
another.
They are,
I
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
understand
And that may have been their thought process.
Which is sort of the argument, if one side can do the left, the other side can do the
Yeah, and that
left.
may
But you
have been
definitely
their
don't want
thought
people
process.
making the left in from there.
Or both, two people on.
But it's going to be, like, hey,
people
that's a call. When you pull into Dunks, you know that's what you're going to be facing when you leave, so you either don't pull in or you're going to go to the right.
And that's what the applicant had said all along, that look, if
gonna be
it's too
so
much of a
everywhere.
problem, they're not gonna come here.
Well, I already do that going into Irving. I know I'm not going to go right out of that.
We've probably beat this to
Or
death.
left
Yeah,
out of
probably
that.
for
Yeah.
tonight.
At this
Will you
point.
publish, will that be on the website, that letter?
Yeah, so if it's not on there now, will be. Now, the interesting thing is, this was a memo from DOT to the applicant, May 1st, 2 weeks before the meeting. I didn't copy me or any of us. And so they knew this, but I contacted them before the meeting, do you have any updates? And they
They
said,
didn't
well,
communicate very clearly about it.
so this
Yeah.
was not shared
Yeah, because
for 2 more weeks.
your notes specify,
Yeah.
That they will update you at the meeting.
ready?
Yeah.
yeah.
Motion to go home,
I'll second that.
AKA adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
That was painful.
Okay.